Twisted Mate Bonds. By Lissa Fay. Chapter 1. We live in a world that seems ordinary, mundane even. People go about their lives as if nothing lies beneath the surface, as if we are all free. You can live, love, laugh, cry, despair just like in any other world. But here, there's an unspoken truth lurking beneath the ordinary. A touch is all it takes for your entire existence to be upended. A single, accidental brush of skin can carve into your soul, leaving marks that can never be undone. It's called the mating bond. Some live their entire lives without it, blissfully untouched by its cruel grasp. You don't need it to survive. You don't seek it. Most people don't even think about it. But if it finds you, there is no running from it, no denying it. It's absolute, unyielding, and as twisted as fate itself. And it happened to me. On my 35th birthday. I'd just finished the last-minute shopping for my party, bags full of snacks, drinks, and decorations dangling from my arms. The streets buzzed with life, a cacophony of chatter and traffic blending into the background as I walked towards my apartment. My headphones blared my favorite rock playlist, drowning out the world. Everything was so normal. Mundane. And then he walked past me. It was the lightest touch, an accidental brush of shoulders as we passed each other on the crowded sidewalk. But that was all it took. It clicked. I stumbled, my knees buckling under me. I tried to take another step, but before I could, I was on the ground, clutching my chest as the bond seared itself into my soul. I wasn't alone. A guttural scream tore from my throat, and through the haze of pain, I heard another hiss. The man who'd walked past me was now on his knees a few feet away, his hands clawing at the pavement. The pain was indescribable, like molten fire pouring into my veins and branding itself onto my very bones. My vision blurred with tears, the world spinning around me. My groceries were scattered across the sidewalk, bags ripped open, oranges and cans rolling into the gutter. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think of anything but the excruciating pull carving its claim into my body. Through the tears and the blinding agony, I caught a glimpse of him. A hooded figure, his face obscured, his shoulders hunched as he staggered to his feet. And then he did the unthinkable. He ran. I blacked out before I could process what was happening. When I woke up, I was in my apartment, sprawled on the couch with my friends hovering over me. My head throbbed, my chest ached, and my skin felt raw, as if the fire still lingered just beneath the surface. "You found your mate?" Nessa asked, her voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Don't call him that," I muttered, my voice hoarse. The word felt foreign, wrong. Mate. It wasn't a word I wanted to associate with the man who'd left me writhing in pain on the sidewalk without so much as a backward glance. Who in their right mind would just leave someone like that? Lucas said, pacing the room, his anger barely contained. "Someone who doesn't want to be bound," came a voice from the doorway. I turned to see him, my partner. The man I'd spent the last decade with. The man I'd built a life with, made plans with, loved. His expression was hard, unreadable, but his actions spoke louder than words. He was packing our life together, the years of memories, the quiet nights, the laughter, the promises. It was all stuffed into a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I watched in stunned silence as he carried his things to the door, each step driving the reality deeper into my chest like a blade. "I knew this might happen," he said, his voice steady but cold. "We all do. No one escapes it, not really." "Wait," I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. "You're leaving? Just like that?" "What do you want me to do?" he snapped, his mask of composure cracking. "Pretend this didn't happen? Pretend everything's fine? It's not, and it never will be." His words cut deeper than the bond's fire. And just like that, he was gone. Out the door, out of my life, leaving me alone in the wreckage of what used to be my world. Everything had changed in an instant. And I had no idea what came next. "You can't blame him," Nessa said softly, sitting on the edge of the couch, her voice almost a whisper. "You know it's the law. And God knows what happens to those who try to intervene with fate." I couldn't bring myself to answer her. Blame him? I didn't know what I felt. Anger. Sadness. Betrayal. It all blurred together in a knot of confusion and despair. My chest still ached from the bond, the lingering phantom burn coiling around my heart. But worse was the hollow feeling that stretched out in its wake, the life I had so carefully built unraveling in a matter of hours. Nessa leaned forward, brushing a stray strand of hair out of my face. Her touch was gentle, grounding, and for a moment, I let myself breathe. Lucas stood by the window, his arms crossed, glancing at me every so often. His frustration was evident, but he said nothing more. He wasn't good with moments like this, and honestly, I was glad he stayed silent. There was nothing anyone could say to make this easier. "Try to rest," Nessa urged after a long pause. You've been through enough today. Her tone was kind but firm, the way only she could manage. My friends didn't leave right away. Nessa stayed close, talking softly, her voice a bomb against the raw edges of my nerves. She told stories, tried to distract me with nonsense about her job, a show she'd started watching, anything to fill the suffocating silence. Lucas brewed tea, even though I didn't want it. He handed me the mug anyway, his expression leaving no room for argument. By the time they left, the apartment was eerily quiet. They promised they'd be back tomorrow, checking in on me like the good friends they were. I thanked them, even though the words felt hollow. As the door clicked shut behind them, I was left alone with my thoughts. Alone with the mess my life had become. I sank back into the couch, staring at the faint patterns of light playing across the ceiling. My mind replayed the events of the day over and over again, each detail sharpening the ache in my chest. The accidental touch. The fire that ignited between us. The hooded figure running away. And then him, my partner, leaving without a second thought. It wasn't his fault. I knew that. Nessa was right, it was the law of this world, as immutable as gravity. The bond wasn't something you could fight, no matter how much you wanted to. No one could. But knowing that didn't make it hurt any less. I closed my eyes, letting out a shaky breath. As I sat there, the dim light of the room casting shadows on the walls, waiting for the kind of sleep that felt impossible, I heard a faint voice. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, the strain of the day twisting my senses. But then it grew clearer, not a sound in the room but a resonance within me. A voice, low and trembling with remorse, echoed in my head. "I'm sorry," he began. I didn't know what else to do. I sat up, heart pounding. "Who's there?" I whispered into the emptiness, though some part of me already knew the answer. It was him. The bond wasn't just a tether, it was a thread that allowed him to reach me, even across distances. "Please." "I didn't want anyone to find out," he continued, his voice faltering. "I had to run. I have 2 kids, and I ran to them. I couldn't leave them. If the government finds out about us, about the bond, they'll take them away. They'll label them as strays. Unbonded. Unclaimed." His words were a tangled mess of fear and anguish, but they cut through me with chilling clarity. I couldn't stop myself. "I'll claim them as mine," I interrupted firmly, my voice steady even as my hands trembled. There was a pause, silence stretching in the bond between us. "Then," he replied, disbelief laced in his tone. "You don't even know me. How can you say that?" I leaned back against the couch, eyes closing as I breathed deeply. "Apparently, the bond thinks we fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. So, what is mine is yours, and what is yours is mine. It's as simple as that." The silence on his end was heavy, but it wasn't the absence of words, it was the weight of consideration, of a decision being made in real time. Less than an hour later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, there he stood tall, with his hood still drawn low, but his face was illuminated now, and I could see the strain etched into his features. In his arms, he cradled 2 small bundles, their tiny forms swaddled in blankets. "There, babies," I said, my voice catching in surprise as I stepped aside to let him in. He nodded, stepping over the threshold. His movements were hesitant, almost as though he feared he'd be turned away. "Their mother died at birth," he said softly, his voice heavy with sorrow. "It's not uncommon when when vampires and humans come together." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, closing the door behind him. "You must have loved her a great deal." He didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened, and his gaze fell to the bundles in his arms. "Yes," he admitted quietly. I cleared my throat, trying to push past the weight of his grief. "Are they Domper?" "Yes," he said simply. "Okay then," I said, squaring my shoulders. "As I said, I'll claim them as mine. But how do I do it without hurting them? That pain on the sidewalk. I can't give them that." His eyes softened, the tension in his posture easing slightly. "You don't. You need to feed them." "Feed them?" I repeated, confused. "They'll link to the bond when they feed. It's instinctual. You'll have to put them at your breast." "Oh." I blinked, my cheeks flushing slightly, but there was no time for embarrassment. "They'll bite. They already have small fangs," he said, glancing at the sleeping forms in his arms. "It won't hurt as much as the bond did." I nodded, my mind whirring. "All right. Let's do it." I sat down on the couch, cradling one of the babies as he handed them to me. They stirred, their tiny faces scrunching up as I placed them each at a breast. The moment their lips latched on, I felt it, the pull of the bond stretching, weaving, enveloping them and me in its unbreakable thread. They bit down gently, and I gasped as warmth spread through me. It wasn't pain but a strange, tingling sensation that seemed to burrow deep into my chest. And as they fed, a flicker of something new stirred within me, a connection, raw and profound, that I couldn't explain. When they finished, I felt the weight of them relax in my arms, their little hands clutching at me as though they'd always belonged there. I glanced at Kane, and his eyes widened slightly. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I asked. "Your eyes," he said, his voice low with wonder. I stood, moving to the mirror by the hallway, and froze. My eyes, once a soft brown, were now a striking violet, glowing faintly in the dim light. "Why did my eyes change?" I asked, turning back to him. They gifted you some of their power," Kane said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's their way of thanking you for saving them." I let out a shaky breath, my fingers brushing over the soft cheeks of the two sleeping babes in my arms. "What are their names?" I asked, my voice soft. "Amy," he said, gesturing to the smaller one, "and Cashin." I smiled, cradling them closer. "Well, Amy and Cashin, you're home now." Chapter 2. The next morning, as sunlight spilled into my small living room, I opened the door to find Lou standing there. He looked like his usual overprotective self, his brow furrowed in that older brother way he always got when he was worried. In one hand, he held my favorite bubble tea he never forgot, and in the other, a box of pastries that smelled like pure comfort. But instead of greeting me with his usual teasing smirk, his eyes locked on mine, and his entire expression shifted. His brows shot up, and he stepped closer, tilting his head as he studied me. "Why are your eyes purple?" he asked, his voice sharp with alarm. I sighed, bracing myself for the inevitable storm. "Good morning to you too, brother," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "Don't good morning me, what's going on?" he pressed, his voice rising slightly. He hadn't even set down the bubble tea. Before I could answer, Kane appeared from the hallway. I hadn't even heard him come in, but there he was, standing tall and calm, his gaze moving from me to Lou. The moment Lou's eyes landed on him, I felt the air in the room shift. Kane barely got a word out before Lou lunged. The box of pastries hit the floor as my brother's fist connected squarely with Kane's face. The sound was visceral, bone meeting bone, the sharp crack of Kane's nose breaking under the force of the punch. "You bastard!" Lou roared, shaking out his hand and glaring at Kane, who stumbled back slightly but didn't retaliate. "You left her. You left my sister screaming in pain, in the dirt, and now you're just standing here like it's fine." Kane, blood dripping from his nose, wiped it with the back of his hand. "I guess I deserved that," he said evenly, his tone calm but subdued. "There's more where that came from." Lou growled, gearing up for another hit, but I stepped in, placing a firm hand on his chest. "Stop," I said sharply, looking him in the eyes. "You'll just hurt your hand pointlessly," I added. "He left you," Lou shouted, his chest heaving. "And you're hurting yourself punching him," I shot back. I gestured toward Kane, whose nose was already straightening, the blood flow stopping as the skin began to knit itself back together. "Look, it's already healed." "He's a vampire, Lou." Lou froze, his jaw slack, as he stared at Kane in disbelief. "A vampire," he repeated, his voice dripping with incredulity. He took a step back, looking at me like I'd just announced I'd joined a cult. "You bonded with a vampire? Are you mad?" "Yes, Lou," I said, throwing my hands up in frustration. "Because apparently, I had a choice in all this, right? Like I personally invited all this chaos into my life." His face softened, his anger dimming as the guilt began to creep in. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're right. I'm an idiot." "You're not an idiot," I said with a sigh. "You're my big brother. And also," I paused, a smile tugging at my lips, "an uncle." That got his attention. His eyes snapped back to mine, confusion flashing across his face. "Come again," he said, his voice carefully measured. I motioned toward the hallway. "Kane," I said, turning to the man still standing there, now watching us with a faintly wary expression. "Can you bring them in?" Kane nodded, disappearing briefly and returning moments later with two tiny bundles cradled in his arms. The twins, Amy and Cashin, were wrapped snugly in blankets, their soft, sleepy faces peeking out. Lou stared, his mouth opening and closing as if words had completely failed him. You have kids," he finally managed. "I do now," I said simply, stepping closer to Kane and gently taking Amy into my arms. "Meet Amy and Cashin, your niece and nephew." I'm an uncle," Lou whispered, his voice barely audible. "Yes, you are," I said, smiling down at the twins. "And before you ask, yes, I claimed them as my own. And yes, they're mine now, no matter what anyone says." Lou shook his head, his hands going to his hips. Don't even know where to start with this. He looked at Kane, his protective instincts flaring up again. You just dropped 2 babies on my sister after everything you've done. Kane met his gaze evenly. I didn't drop them on her. They're part of me, and now, because of the bond, they're part of her too. She chose to claim them. And you let her. Lou snapped. Lou, I said firmly, cutting him off. Stop. I made this decision. Me. Kane didn't force me, and neither did anyone else. Lou exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. All right. Fine. But if you hurt her or those kids, he pointed a finger at Kane, his expression deadly serious. He won't, I said, stepping in before Kane could reply. Because if he does, he'll answer to me first. Kane's lips twitched into a faint smile. Fair enough, he said quietly. And to answer your earlier question about my eyes, well, they gave them to me when we linked. Lou stared at the twins again, his tough exterior melting as Amy yawned and reached out toward him with her tiny fingers. He hesitated, then slowly extended a finger, letting her grab onto it. She likes you, I said softly, watching the moment unfold. Lou's eyes flicked up to mine, and I could see the beginnings of a smile. Wait until they meet Nessa, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. She'll melt when she sees them. I smiled back, but I wasn't about to let him off the hook just yet. Lucas, I said, my tone shifting slightly. I want you to meet Kane. I know you've already punched him, but at least you should know his name. Lou scratched the back of his head, looking slightly sheepish. Right, about that. You'd do it again in a heartbeat, Kane said, cutting him off with a faint smile. And nobody would condemn you for it, so you don't need to apologize. Lou blinked, caught off guard by the lack of animosity. Kane, I said, gesturing to Lou, meet my older, very protective brother, Lucas. It's always been just the two of us, so he tends to get carried away with his punches. But I shot a pointed look at Kane. Even though you had a good excuse for running away, you still deserve to be punched. No offense. None taken, Kane said with a small nod. The tension eased slightly, though it still lingered in the air like a faint haze. Lou sighed, crossing his arms as he glanced between Kane and me. All right, he said finally. Let's sit down and talk, because clearly, I've missed a lot. I smiled, leading him toward the couch. You've missed more than you think. Chapter 3. The door hadn't even fully shut when another knock echoed through the room. I sighed, already knowing who it was. As I opened it again, there stood Nessa, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, her face lit up with excitement. She didn't give me a chance to say anything before throwing her arms around me in a tight hug. Hey, she said brightly, her warmth momentarily easing the tension lingering from earlier. But as her gaze shifted over my shoulder and landed on Kane, her entire demeanor shifted. Her smile thinned, and she shot him a glare sharp enough to draw blood. Don't start, I warned gently, pulling her further inside. Nessa ignored me, turning her attention instead to the couch, where Lou was sitting with the twins. The moment her eyes landed on them, all hostility melted away. Oh my God, she whispered, walking over. They're adorable. She crouched down beside Lou, her fingers already reaching out to touch their tiny hands and feet. A giggle escaped her lips as she gently tickled Cashin's toes. They're so small. I didn't know babies could be this tiny. Lou smiled, pride glowing on his face as he gestured to them. Meet Cashin and Amy, he said softly. Nessa's eyes widened, and without hesitation, she scooped Amy into her arms, cradling her close to her chest. She pressed a soft kiss to Amy's forehead, her smile only growing as she reached her free hand toward Cashin. He's strong, she said, laughing as Cashin gripped her finger tightly. Look at him. He's got a death grip already. Her laughter turned into a startled gasp when Cashin suddenly pulled her finger toward his mouth and bit down, not hard, but enough for it to be noticeable. Cass. I scolded gently, but Nessa didn't seem to hear me. She stilled, her entire body going rigid as Cashin continued nibbling on her finger. Her eyes glazed over, turning an unnatural shade of silver. A strange, soft glow emanated from her hand, and intricate, vine-like patterns began to form on her skin, spiraling out from where Cashin's mouth touched her. Lou's mouth dropped open. He marked you, he said in awe. What? Nessa blinked, snapping out of her trance, her hand trembling slightly as she pulled her finger away. The patterns didn't fade. What does that mean? She asked, looking between us for answers. Kane stepped forward, his expression calm yet curious. It's the bond, he said. But because he's a baby, it must react differently than it would with adults. Nessa looked completely lost. Bond? What bond? What are you even talking about? Lou, ever the one to lighten the mood, smirked and leaned back, crossing his arms. It means you finally got yourself a boyfriend, Ness, he teased. You just have to wait, oh, I don't know, about 18 years for him to grow up. He was laughing before he even finished the sentence. Her head snapped toward him, and before he could react, she punched him in the shoulder so hard he tumbled off the couch and hit the floor with a loud thud. Shut up, Lou. Still laughing from the floor, Lou winced and rubbed his shoulder. What? Just saying, you found your mate, he added, the teasing grin never leaving his face. Nessa turned back to me, her eyes wide and filled with panic. Wait, is that even possible? Is he really my mate? I didn't know. I wanted to give her a reassuring answer, but I didn't have one. So, I turned to Kane, silently asking him to step in. Kane sighed, running a hand through his hair as he took a step closer. Yes, he said, his voice low but certain. It seems that way. And before you ask, no, I didn't know babies could mark their mates before they could even talk. That's new. He hesitated, then added. And no, you don't have to wait 18 years. Vampires half-human, half-vampire children mature much faster. About 7 to 8 years. Vampires. Nessa echoed, the word foreign on her tongue. Right, I said, feeling the weight of her gaze. So, Kane's a vampire. And these two are half-human, half-vampire. I was, kind of planning to explain all that later. Her face paled. My mate is half-vampire, she said faintly. Before anyone could respond, her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the floor. Vanessa. I dropped to my knees beside her, gently shaking her shoulders. Ness, can you hear me? She's coming to, Kane said, crouching beside me. Sure enough, Nessa's eyes fluttered open, her gaze unfocused at first but quickly sharpening. She sat up slowly, her hand going to her head as she looked around. What just happened? You fainted, I said softly, helping her sit upright. Yeah, you took that mate bombshell really well, Lou quipped from the couch, still rubbing his shoulder. Lou, not the time, I snapped, shooting him a glare. Nessa turned to Kane, her voice trembling. Is this real? Is he really my mate? Yes, Kane said firmly, meeting her gaze. It's real. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked down at her hand, tracing the glowing patterns that now adorned her skin. What do I even do now? You take it one step at a time, I said gently. No one expects you to figure it all out right away. Just breathe, okay? She nodded, her breathing unsteady but slowing. Okay, she whispered. Cashin, still on the couch, let out a tiny, cooing sound that broke through the tension. Nessa's gaze softened as she looked at him, a small smile tugging at her lips despite everything. He's really strong, she said quietly, reaching out to touch his tiny hand again. And apparently, very determined, Lou said with a chuckle. For once, Nessa didn't hit him. She just smiled, her fingers brushing over Cashin's as she tried to make sense of the chaos her life had just become. She sat on the floor for a moment longer, her fingers still gently brushing against the intricate patterns on her hand. Her silver eyes gleamed faintly, reflecting the shifting light, and her breathing steadied as she focused on Cashin. He stared back at her with wide, curious eyes, his small hand wrapping around her finger once more, as if grounding her in this strange, new reality. I exchanged a glance with Kane, who gave me a subtle nod, his expression unreadable but calm. He was clearly trying not to overwhelm her further, but there was an undeniable intensity in his gaze as he observed the moment between Nessa and Cashin. I don't even know what to feel, Nessa said quietly, breaking the silence. She turned her gaze to me, her eyes still full of uncertainty. What happens now? What does this mean for me? It means you're stuck with us, Lou teased, though his voice was softer this time, almost comforting. Welcome to the chaos, little sister. You've officially joined the club of life-altering, supernatural surprises. Nessa shot him a half-hearted glare. Not helping, Lou. Sorry, just trying to lighten the mood, he said, holding his hands up defensively. Kane knelt beside her, his voice calm and steady. It means that Cashin will always have a connection to you, one that neither time nor distance can break. You're part of his life now, just as much as he's part of yours. But it doesn't mean your entire world has to change overnight. You can take this at your own pace. Nessa looked up at him, her brow furrowing. But what does that mean for the bond? Does it mean I'm supposed to protect him? Raise him? What if I'm not ready for that? You don't have to figure it out alone, I interjected, my voice firm but reassuring. We're all here for you, Nessa. Lou, me, Kane will help you however we can. You don't have to do this by yourself. She nodded slowly, her fingers still absently tracing the glowing patterns on her hand. It's just a lot to take in. I mean, I thought I was just visiting to see you and Lou, and now I've got a mate who's not even out of diapers. Lou snorted. You've got to admit, it's kind of funny. Nessa glared at him again. I swear, Lou, if you say one more word. Okay, he said quickly, holding up his hands. I'll shut up. For now. Kane chuckled softly, but his gaze remained on Nessa, his tone thoughtful. The bond is unusual, yes, but it's not something to fear. It's a connection, not a demand. It's there to guide you, not to dictate your choices. She frowned, clearly still processing everything. And what about this? She asked, holding up her marked hand. Does it stay like this forever? It will fade, Kane said, but the bond won't. The patterns are just the first sign of the connection forming. Over time, they'll become less visible, but they'll always be a part of you, just like the bond. Nessa stared at her hand for a moment longer before letting out a soft sigh. This is the weirdest day of my life, she muttered. I smiled. Welcome to my world. Her gaze softened, and she finally managed a small, tentative smile. I guess it's a family thing, huh? You and Kane, me and Cass. Lou leaned back against the couch, his arms crossed. We're like a supernatural soap opera at this point. Someone should be writing this down. I rolled my eyes. Lou, I swear. Before I could finish, a soft cry came from Amy, still cradled in Nessa's arms. Her tiny face scrunched up, and Nessa instinctively rocked her, humming softly to calm her down. It worked almost instantly, Amy settling with a small, contented sigh. Lou's teasing grin softened into something more genuine. You're a natural, he said quietly. Nessa glanced at him, surprised by the rare compliment. I don't know about that, she said, her voice uncertain but touched. You are, I said, backing Lou up. And you'll figure this out, Nessa. You're stronger than you think. She looked at me, her silver eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and determination. I hope so, she said softly. The moment hung in the air, fragile but comforting. And then, as if to shatter the calm, there was a loud knock at the door. Chapter 4. Kane's expression immediately darkened, and I felt my stomach twist. Something about the knock didn't feel right. It was too forceful, too sharp. Lou stood, handing cash to me before moving toward the door. I'll get it, he said, his tone suddenly serious. Wait, Kane said, his voice low. Be careful. Lou glanced back at him, a flicker of tension passing between them, but he nodded. He opened the door just a crack, his body blocking the view from the inside. What do you want? I heard him say, his voice hard and guarded. The response was muffled, but I caught the sharp, cold tone of whoever was on the other side. My heart began to race as I saw Lou's shoulders tense. Who is it? I asked, standing with Amy still in my arms. Lou didn't answer right away. He turned back toward us, his face unreadable but grim. We've got company, he said finally. Kane was already moving, his expression like stone. Stay here, he said firmly, his eyes locking with mine. Like hell I will, I shot back. He opened his mouth to argue, but before he could, the door was shoved open, and a tall figure stepped inside. The room seemed to grow colder as they entered, their presence almost suffocating. Dressed in dark clothing, their eyes gleamed with an unnatural, predatory light. And when they smiled, their teeth were sharp and gleaming. Well, isn't this cozy, the stranger said, their voice smooth but dripping with malice. Kane stepped in front of me, his posture protective. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice low and dangerous. The stranger's smile widened. Oh, but I think I should. And just like that, the fragile calm shattered. The air in the room grew heavy with tension, a tangible weight pressing down on all of us. Lou instinctively stepped closer to Nessa, his broad shoulders squared and ready for a fight. Nessa clutched Amy protectively to her chest, her silver eyes narrowing as she stared at the intruder. Even Cashin, still in my arms, seemed to sense the danger, his tiny fingers gripping my shirt tightly as if to anchor himself. Kane's stance was firm, unyielding, as he positioned himself between us and the stranger. His usually calm demeanor had given way to something sharper, more feral. His voice, when he spoke, was a low growl. You've crossed a line coming here. State your business and leave, or you won't leave at all. The stranger chuckled, the sound cold and devoid of humor. Always so dramatic, Kane. I thought we could skip the theatrics, but I see you've still got that chip on your shoulder. Their gaze shifted, roaming the room with predatory curiosity. When their eyes landed on me, a chill ran down my spine. And you, they said, their voice dripping with mockery, You're the one who caused all this trouble. Such a fragile little thing, yet you've managed to stir up quite the storm. I tightened my grip on Cashin, taking an instinctive step back. Kane immediately mirrored my movement, placing himself more solidly in front of me. If you so much as look at her the wrong way, I'll make sure you regret it, he snarled, his fangs glinting as he spoke. The stranger raised their hands in mock surrender. Relax, Kane. I'm not here to hurt anyone, yet. I'm simply here to deliver a message. Then deliver it and leave, Lou snapped, his voice like a whip crack. He was coiled tightly, ready to spring at the slightest provocation. The stranger ignored him, their eyes flicking back to me. You've made quite the impression, little human. Bonds with a vampire, marked by Domper offspring, it's all very unprecedented. Naturally, it's caught the attention of those who'd rather see such anomalies eliminated. Anomalies? I repeated, my voice stronger than I expected despite the fear clawing at my chest. They're my family, not some science experiment. The stranger tilted their head, almost amused. Family, they mused. How quaint. But you see, not everyone shares your sentimental view. There are those who believe such bonds are dangerous threats to the balance we've worked so hard to maintain. And who exactly is we? Kane demanded, his tone laced with venom. The stranger's smile turned razor sharp. The council, of course. Did you think they wouldn't notice? You've broken more rules in the past few months than most vampires break in a lifetime. And now there's this. He gestured vaguely at the twins, their expression unreadable but chilling. You can tell the council to shove their rules, Lou said, his voice like thunder. This is our family, our lives. They don't get to dictate anything here. The stranger laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the room. Spoken like a true fool. Do you think the council cares about your little declarations of independence? They see only threats, and they'll do whatever it takes to neutralize them. I stepped forward, despite Kane's outstretched arm trying to hold me back. My voice was steady, even as my heart raced. If they want to come after us, they can try. But they'll find out very quickly that we're not so easy to neutralize. The stranger's eyes gleamed with interest, their smile twisting into something almost admiring. You've got fire, I'll give you that. But fire alone won't save you. Before anyone could respond, they turned abruptly, heading for the door. Just as they reached it, they paused, glancing over their shoulder. Consider this a warning. The council is watching. And when they come, you'd better be ready. With that, they were gone, disappearing into the night as quickly as they'd appeared. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving a tense silence in their wake. Lou was the first to speak, breaking the stillness with a muttered curse. The council, he said, his tone bitter. Just what we needed. Nessa was still clutching Amy tightly, her expression a mix of fear and determination. Who are they? What do they want? They're an ancient governing body, Kane explained, his voice tight. Vampires, mostly, though they've got their claws in other supernatural communities as well. They claim to maintain order, but their methods are ruthless. If they see something as a threat, they don't hesitate to eliminate it. And now we're their target, I said, my stomach twisting at the thought. Kane nodded grimly. It seems that way. Well, they can try, Lou said fiercely. But they'll have to go through all of us first. Kane gave him a long look, something unspoken passing between them. It won't be that simple. The council doesn't fight fair. They'll use every trick, every advantage, to get what they want. Then we'll outsmart them, I said, surprising even myself with the resolve in my voice. We'll protect each other, no matter what. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Kane stepped closer, his hand brushing against mine. We'll fight, he said quietly, his voice carrying a promise. For our family. For our future. And in that moment, despite the looming threat, I knew we wouldn't face it alone. Chapter 5. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken fears, but beneath it all, a fierce determination burned. Lou ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. All right, he said, his voice steady but laced with tension. If we're doing this, if we're standing against the council, we need a plan. Sitting around waiting for them to make their move isn't an option. Kane nodded, but his expression remained grim. They won't come at us head on, not at first. The council doesn't work that way. They'll test us, probe for weaknesses, and when they find them. His gaze flickered toward the twins, then to me. They'll strike where it hurts the most. A chill ran through me, but I squared my shoulders. Then we don't give them any weaknesses to exploit. Lou snorted. Easier said than done. You've got two newborn Dompairs, a freshly bonded human, and a vampire who's already on their shit list. Weaknesses. We're swimming in them. Then we turn them into strengths, I countered, feeling the words settle into something solid inside me. I looked at Kane. You know how they operate. We use that. We make it so that every move they make against us only strengthens our position. Kane studied me, something unreadable in his gaze. You're not afraid. Oh, I am, I admitted. But fear won't save us. We have too much to lose to let it rule us. A slow, almost reluctant smile tugged at Kane's lips. You sound like a queen rallying her army. Then I guess it's a good thing I have warriors beside me. Lou groaned. All right, I'm in. But I swear, if I end up in some war because of this, I'm blaming you. Nessa finally spoke, her voice soft but resolute. We're already in a war, Lou. We just didn't realize it until now. A heavy silence followed her words, and I saw it in their eyes, that shared understanding that we were past the point of return. Kane turned to me. We need to leave. Staying here puts you and the twins at risk. I frowned. Leave where? I have safe houses. Places even the council doesn't know about. We need time to prepare, to train. We can't afford to be caught off guard. Lou crossed his arms. And how do we know this isn't exactly what they want? Driving us into hiding, separating us from any allies we might have. Kane hesitated, and I could see the battle in his mind. Finally, he sighed. Then we don't run. We fortify. Lou grinned. Now you're speaking my language. Amy stirred in Nessa's arms, and Cashin let out a small whimper. My heart clenched as I held him closer. This wasn't just about us. It never was. I looked at each of them, my family, my world. Then we prepare. We fight. And when the council comes, they'll regret ever thinking we were prey, Kane finished, his voice a quiet promise of war. The fight hadn't started yet, but I knew one thing for certain. We wouldn't lose. Chapter 6. The weight of our decision settled over us like an oncoming storm. There was no turning back now. We had chosen our path, and with it came the responsibility of ensuring that when the council came, we would not be caught off guard. Lou rubbed his temples. All right, let's break this down. If we're staying put, we need defenses, wards, weapons, escape routes. I don't want us boxed in with no way out. Kane nodded. I can reinforce the perimeter, but it won't hold against a full assault. We'll need more than just defenses. We need allies. Allies. Nessa echoed, still holding Amy protectively against her chest. Who? You said yourself the council controls everything. Who would be willing to stand against them? Kane's expression darkened. Not everyone is loyal to the council. There are those who've suffered under their rule, families torn apart, children taken. If we can find them, we might stand a chance. And where do we start? I asked, gripping Cashin tighter. How do we even know who to trust? We don't, Kane admitted. But I have contacts, people who've been underground for years, avoiding the council's reach. Some owe me favors. He hesitated, as if debating whether to say more. There's one in particular we should reach out to. A warlock named Elias. Lou scoffed. A warlock? You're kidding me. Kane's gaze was unyielding. Magic bends to will, not morality. Elias isn't a saint, but he hates the council more than I do. If anyone can help us strengthen our defenses, it's him. I considered this, chewing the inside of my cheek. And where is he? Kane exhaled sharply. That's the problem. Last I heard, he was in the wastes. The wastes? Nessa whispered, her face paling. Nobody survives there. They do if they're strong enough, Kane said. And Elias is nothing if not strong. Lou let out a low whistle. So, we need to find a warlock hiding in a death trap, convince him to help us, and pray he doesn't double-cross us. Sounds great. I met Kane's gaze. Is he our best option? He's our only option. A tense silence stretched between us before I finally nodded. Then we go. Nessa's mouth dropped open. Just like that? Do you even know what the wastes are? Not really, I admitted. But if it's what we need to do to protect the twins, to protect all of us, then I'm willing to take the risk. Kane's expression softened. You don't have to do this alone. I know, I said, glancing at Lou and Nessa. That's why we all go. Lou groaned. Why do I let you drag me into these things? Because you love me. I offered. He sighed. Yeah. Someone's got to keep you from getting killed. Nessa still looked uncertain, but she held Amy closer and nodded. Then I guess we better start preparing. Kane glanced toward the twins. They'll need to stay here. Taking them into the wastes is too dangerous. My heart clenched, but I knew he was right. Then we make sure they're safe before we leave. Kane placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch grounding. We'll come back. I promise. I met his eyes, my violet reflection staring back at me. Then let's make sure we have something to come back to. Kane cleared his throat. We should go soon. His voice was quiet, but there was an urgency beneath it. The longer we stay, the more we risk drawing attention. I nodded, my stomach tightening. I know. Lou's playful demeanor faded as he met my gaze. Are you sure about this, Key? No. But I had to be. Yes. Nessa looked between us, her expression shifting. You're leaving. I hesitated, but there was no point in lying to her. We have to. The council. I know, she interrupted, her grip on Amy tightening. I wish you didn't have to. Me too. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken emotions, but there was no time to dwell on them. I looked at Kane. What do we need? Minimal supplies, he said. Traveling light will be safer. Weapons, if you have them. The wastes aren't kind to the unprepared. Lou cracked his knuckles. Well, I don't have fangs, but I can throw a hell of a punch. He shot a glare at Kane. As you already know. Kane exhaled, clearly resisting the urge to roll his eyes. Yes. I'm aware. I turned back to Nessa. You'll be safe here. The wards around the apartment should hold, and no one else knows about the twins. I'll protect them, she said firmly. No matter what. I smiled. I know you will. She looked down at Amy, then back at me. Come back, okay. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. We will. At least, I hope so. Chapter 7. We packed quickly. There wasn't much to take, only what was necessary. Kane was right. The wastes weren't the kind of place you entered weighed down by baggage, physical or otherwise. I secured my daggers, their familiar weight pressing against my thighs. Lou strapped a blade across his back, though he still grumbled about how he'd rather have a gun. Kane, ever the pragmatic one, packed a set of vials filled with an inky, dark liquid. What's that? Lou asked, watching him stash them in his coat. Kane didn't look up. Emergency supply. Lou's lips curled in distaste. Blood. Kane's expression remained neutral. Yes. Lou scoffed. Fantastic. This just keeps getting better. I shot him a look, and he sighed. I know. You bonded with him, so I'm supposed to tolerate him. But I reserve the right to be annoyed. You'd be annoyed either way. True, he admitted. But this makes it extra fun. Kane ignored him, which only seemed to amuse Lou more. I, however, was too focused on Nessa. She stood by the door, arms wrapped tightly around herself, watching us prepare to leave. Cashin and Amy were nestled in their bassinet, unaware that their mother was about to walk out the door. I hesitated before stepping toward her. Ness. Her eyes snapped up, filled with something raw. I know why you have to do this. She swallowed, voice thick with emotion. But I still hate it. I hate it too. I exhaled slowly. But the council needs to be burned to the ground, she finished, her voice sharper now. I get it, Kiera. I do. She shook her head. I'm terrified. I grabbed her hand, squeezing it tightly. You're the strongest person I know. And you won't be alone. Cashin, he's yours, Ness. He's bonded to you. He'll need you just as much as you need him. Something in her gaze softened, but there was still doubt there. And you? Who's going to keep you safe? I didn't answer. Kane was silent behind me. Lou didn't speak either. Because the truth was, there were no guarantees. Instead, I forced a smile. We'll be back before you know it. She studied me for a long moment before sighing and pulling me into a tight hug. You'd better be. I held her just as fiercely, the weight of our unspoken fears pressing between us. Then I stepped back. Lou ruffled her hair on the way out, earning himself a sharp glare. Don't break anything while we're gone. She rolled her eyes. You're the one who breaks things, Lou. True. He flashed a grin before heading toward the door. Kane lingered only for a moment before nodding toward Nessa, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, we were gone. Chapter 8. The air outside was cold, the kind of biting chill that seeped into your bones. A storm was brewing on the horizon, dark clouds stretching across the sky like ominous fingers. The wastes lay beyond the city's edge, a vast, barren land where the council's grip was weaker but where danger thrived in its absence. It was a place for outcasts, for those who didn't fit into the rigid laws of supernatural society. It was also the last place we wanted to be. Remind me again why we're doing this. Lou muttered as we walked. Because we don't have a choice, I answered. Kane, walking beside me, nodded. The council won't stop hunting us. The wastes may be dangerous, but at least there, we have a chance to fight back. Lou sighed. Fine. But if I die, I'm coming back to haunt both of you. I smirked. Duly noted. We reached the outskirts of the city as the wind howled through the streets. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with risks we couldn't yet see. But there was no turning back now. And somewhere, deep in the unknown, our war was waiting. The city faded behind us, swallowed by the rolling fog that clung to the edges of the world. Ahead, the land stretched vast and desolate, an endless expanse of jagged rocks and cracked earth. The wastes had no mercy for the weak, and the deeper we ventured, the more the air itself seemed to change thicker, heavier, humming with old, untamed power. Lou walked beside me, unusually quiet. His usual cocky swagger had dimmed, replaced by a sharp, assessing gaze that swept the terrain ahead. He might have been reckless, but he wasn't stupid. He knew this place wasn't just dangerous, it was alive. Kane, on the other hand, moved like a shadow. His steps were silent, his presence almost ghostly. He didn't need to say anything, I could feel the tension in him, the way his body coiled like a predator waiting for someone to strike. We walked in silence for what felt like hours, the wind tearing through the open land, shrieking like some wounded thing. Then Lou stopped. Something's watching us, he muttered. I felt it too. A prickling sensation along my skin, as if unseen eyes were crawling over me. Kane stiffened beside me, nostrils flaring slightly. He caught the scent before I did. Shit. What? Lou's hand was already at his blade. What is it? Kane turned his head slightly, his eyes dark as he whispered. Not what? Who? The shadows shifted. I barely had time to react before something moved fast, faster than anything I'd ever seen. A blur of motion shot toward us, a glint of steel flashing in the dim light. Kane lunged, intercepting the attack just before the blade met Lou's throat. Clang. The sound of metal colliding rang through the air as Kane's dagger met the stranger's blade. Sparks flew, and for the first time, I caught a glimpse of the figure. A woman. She moved with the kind of deadly grace that could only be honed through years of battle. Her long dark hair was braided back, her sharp eyes glinting like molten gold in the dim light. She wore dark leather, fitted and reinforced, and every inch of her spoke of a warrior born and bred for war. Lou stumbled back, eyes wide. What the? The woman twisted, breaking away from Kane with an effortless movement. She didn't retreat. Instead, she tilted her head, appraising us with the kind of detached interest one might give a problem that needed solving. Then she spoke. You shouldn't be here. Her voice was smooth, but there was an edge beneath it, a quiet warning. Lou let out a slow breath, rolling his shoulders. Yeah, well, we don't exactly have a choice. Her gaze flicked to him, and something in her expression sharpened. You reek of power. Lou's lips curled into a smirk. Flattering. She ignored his tone, her eyes narrowing slightly. And stupidity. I stepped forward, keeping my stance firm but non-threatening. Who are you? The woman studied me for a long moment before answering. Kala. Lou raised an eyebrow. Just Kala. A smirk ghosted across her lips. For now. Kane's grip on his blade didn't ease. What do you want? Her golden eyes flickered with something unreadable. That depends. Are you here to die, or do you actually have a purpose? I exhaled. We're heading deeper into the wastes. Kala's expression didn't change, but I saw something shift in her posture. Interest, maybe. Or amusement. Then you're either incredibly brave, she mused, or incredibly stupid. Lou grinned. Why not both? For the first time, something like curiosity flickered in her gaze as she looked at him. It wasn't a friendly look, not yet. But it wasn't hostile either. I had a feeling we hadn't seen the last of her. Chapter 9. We traveled mostly at night, keeping to the shadows, avoiding any unnecessary attention. The council's reach was long, but out here, in the forgotten places, their grip loosened. It was on the third night that we ran into trouble. We had stopped to rest in the remnants of an old gas station. The skeletal remains of rusting cars littered the parking lot, and the faded signage barely clung to the building's facade. Inside, it smelled of dust and decay, but it was shelter for the night. I'll take first watch, Kane said, standing near the broken doorway, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. I'll take second, I offered, setting down my pack. Lou grumbled something about wanting to sleep for a full week, but then. A sound. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Hoofbeats. I exchanged a look with Lou, who immediately went tense. Kane was already moving, his entire body going still in that eerie way of his. A moment later, the first rider came into view. And then another. And another. 5 in total, dressed in the dark, battered leathers of bounty hunters. Their faces were obscured by scarves, but their weapons were visible. Well, one of them drawled as they slowed to a halt just outside the station. Looks like we found ourselves a prize, boys. My hand went to my weapon, but Kane was faster. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of me, eyes glowing red in the dim light. One of the hunters stiffened. A vampire, he spat. Kane didn't move. Didn't blink. Walk away, he said. The man laughed. That's not how this works. And then all hell broke loose. The first hunter lunged, but before I could even react, Kane was already there. A blur of motion, then the sickening crunch of bone snapping. The hunter collapsed with a strangled cry, his body crumpling like a broken marionette. Lou was on the second one in an instant, tackling him to the ground with a snarl, fists flying. The sharp crack of a jaw breaking rang out as he drove his knee into the man's ribs. Then everything descended into chaos. The third bounty hunter swung a wicked, curved blade at Kane, but he dodged with inhuman grace, catching the man's wrist in a brutal grip before twisting hard. A scream tore through the night as the bone snapped, and Kane, impassive as ever, let the man drop. I turned, barely in time to block a blow aimed for my ribs. The fourth hunter, a woman with a scar running down her cheek, grinned as she pressed her advantage, her twin daggers glinting in the moonlight. I ducked, pivoting fast, slashing upward with my own blade. She twisted away, agile, but not before I caught the edge of her sleeve, slicing through fabric and into flesh. She hissed but didn't retreat. Somewhere to my right, Lou let out a sharp grunt, his fight turning vicious. His opponent had managed to get him in a chokehold, but Lou rammed an elbow into the man's gut, flipping him over with brute strength. The bounty hunter hit the ground hard, coughing blood. Then, a streak of silver out of the corner of my eye. I barely had time to react before I was shoved forward just as a blade whistled past where my head had been. I spun, expecting another attacker. And instead, I came face to face with her. Kala. The same woman we had encountered a few nights ago. She wasn't attacking me. She was parrying a vicious blow from another bounty hunter, her blade flashing in a deadly arc as she forced her opponent back. Her movements were precise, controlled, her silver hair catching in the dim light as she twisted with lethal grace. Tall. Lithe. Dressed in dark leathers, her sharp eyes flicked toward me just for a fraction of a second, as if assessing whether I was a threat. That second cost her. The bounty hunter she had been fighting took advantage of her momentary distraction, lunging with a dagger aimed for her ribs. She barely managed to shift, but it wasn't enough. Lou was suddenly there. A blur of movement, faster than I could process. He shoved her aside, his hand colliding with her arm just as the bounty hunter's dagger grazed her side instead of plunging deep. Then it happened. The moment his hand met her skin. I saw it. The way he went rigid. The way his breath hitched, eyes widening in stunned disbelief. The way she staggered back, her blade slipping from suddenly numb fingers, hitting the ground with a dull clang. For a single heartbeat, silence. Then. No, she whispered. Lou's jaw clenched. His throat bobbed. Shit. And just like that, the bond ignited. The silence that followed was deafening. Kala's breathing had turned shallow, her chest rising and falling too quickly, her pupils blown wide as she stared at Lou like he was a phantom clawing its way into her reality. Lou wasn't any better. His fists clenched at his sides, his entire body locked tight as though he were physically restraining himself from reaching for her. I could almost hear the way his heartbeat stuttered, how it slammed back into a rhythm too erratic, too raw. She took a step back. Just one. He took a step forward. Instinct. Her fingers twitched toward the hilt of her sword, as if she could will herself into believing this hadn't just happened. As if she could sever the bond with a well-placed strike. But she didn't touch it. Instead, she whispered again, her voice a quiet, venomous thing. No. Lou flinched. It was subtle, so subtle I almost missed it, but the way his throat worked, the way his jaw ticked, I knew that single word had hit harder than any blade. But before anything else could be said, another bounty hunter appeared, sprinting toward us, a short sword raised, eyes wild with desperation. Kane moved before I could, throwing his own dagger with precision. It buried itself in the man's throat before he even had a chance to register his own death. He hit the ground, twitching, then went still. It snapped the moment. Kala turned sharply on her heel, and without another word, without a single glance backward, she fled. Lou let out a breath, one I wasn't sure he'd realized he'd been holding. I stepped closer, watching him, waiting for something. Anything. He swallowed, rubbing a hand down his face before muttering. Fuck. That summed things up rather nicely. The bond had snapped into place, undeniable, unrelenting. And Kala? She wanted nothing to do with it. Chapter 10. The aftermath was messy. Bodies littered the ground, blood staining the dirt, the metallic scent thick in the air. Kane moved efficiently, checking the ones still breathing, making sure none would be getting up again. Lou, however, was motionless, still staring in the direction Kala had disappeared. I nudged him. You good? His laugh was humorless. Do I look good? Honestly? You look like you just got hit by a celestial truck. He snorted, but it lacked amusement. I need to go after her. His voice was quieter now, lacking its usual sharpness. Not yet, Kane interjected, wiping his blade clean. She ran for a reason. If you push now, you'll just drive her further. Lou's fingers twitched, as if itching to chase anyway, but he knew Kane was right. He let out a frustrated growl, raking a hand through his hair. This is fucking bullshit. Welcome to the mate bond, I muttered. Kane shot me a pointed look, but I ignored it. This wasn't just some minor inconvenience, this was a supernatural law of the universe deciding to upend Lou's entire existence in the middle of a battle. Lou wasn't ready for it. And from the way Kala had looked at him like she would rather rip herself apart than accept what had just happened, she wasn't either. But fate didn't care about readiness. We traveled in silence for a while, putting distance between us and the battlefield. By the time we stopped to rest, the sky had shifted into deep hues of indigo and violet, the first stars flickering to life. Lou had barely said a word. I let him be. For now. Kane, on the other hand, was watching him closely, as if expecting him to combust at any second. It was Lou who finally broke the silence. What if she never comes back? His voice was quiet. Too quiet. Kane sighed. She will. You don't know that. I do. Kane's gaze was steady. Because no matter how much she fights it, no matter how much she runs, the bond won't let her ignore it forever. Lou exhaled sharply, rubbing the heel of his palm against his temple. This is worse than I thought. Yeah, I said, stretching out on the ground. Welcome to destiny, brother. Lou groaned. Destiny can go fuck itself. I chuckled, but beneath the humor, I knew this was only the beginning. Whether Kala liked it or not, whether Lou wanted it or not, fate had already decided. And eventually, one way or another, she would return. The fire crackled between us, casting shifting shadows along the rocky terrain. Kane sat with his back against a boulder, sharpening one of his daggers with slow, methodical movements. Lou sat cross-legged on the ground, shoulders hunched, still brooding. I knew better than to push him right now. Instead, I focused on keeping my senses stretched, listening beyond the flickering flames and the rustling leaves. The wastes weren't forgiving, and if those bounty hunters had found us, others could too. Still, my mind kept drifting back to Kala. To the way she had looked at Lou like she wanted to reject the very air between them. Mate bonds weren't supposed to work like that. Sure, some were more reluctant than others, but the sheer defiance in her expression, the almost panicked recoil, it was different. Something wasn't right. And Lou, whether he admitted it or not, was drowning in the uncertainty of it all. She'll come back, Kane said suddenly, breaking the silence. Lou let out a bitter scoff. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Kane didn't even glance up from his blade. She can fight it for a while, but the bond will gnaw at her. The longer she stays away, the worse it'll get. Lou dragged a hand down his face. What if she's strong enough to resist? Kane's hand stilled. His eyes flicked up, locking onto Lou's. Then you'll have to be stronger, he said simply. Lou tensed. I could almost hear the battle waging inside him, the instinct to chase, to claim, warring against the very real fact that Kala had run. I exhaled and leaned back on my elbows. Fate has a way of making people come back around. One way or another. Lou didn't answer. Instead, he stood abruptly, brushing dirt from his hands. I'm taking first watch. Kane and I exchanged a glance but didn't argue. We let him be. He needed time. But deep down, I had a feeling that time wouldn't be enough to change what had already been set in motion. Chapter 11. The days that followed were tense. We moved quickly, covering ground as we made our way deeper into the wastes, but Lou remained distracted. It was in the way his eyes flickered to every shifting shadow, the way he would tense at the slightest unfamiliar sound. He was waiting. Hoping. And growing increasingly frustrated when nothing happened. By the fourth day, he was ready to tear something apart. She's not coming, he muttered under his breath, shoving a branch out of the way as we trudged through a dense thicket. She will, Kane repeated, his patience unwavering. Lou shot him a glare. You sure about that? Because it's been 4 damn days, and she's probably halfway to another continent by now. Kane didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he tilted his head, his sharp gaze scanning the path ahead. We'll see. Lou groaned in frustration and picked up the pace. But then. A snap. Not from us. I froze, my hand immediately going to my weapon. Kane did the same, his entire body shifting into a state of readiness. Lou stilled. Another snap. A rustle. And then. A figure stepped onto the path. Not Kala. A man. Tall, built like a boulder, with cruel, calculating eyes. A bounty hunter, but not just any bounty hunter. This one had an air of authority. His lips curled into a smirk. Well, he drawled, unsheathing a curved blade. Been looking for you three. And just like that, the fight began. He wasn't alone. Figures emerged from the trees, at least 6 of them, all armed, all ready. Lou wasted no time. With a snarl, he lunged, fists colliding with the nearest enemy. Kane moved with terrifying efficiency, his daggers slicing through the air, finding targets with deadly precision. I barely had time to react before another attacker came for me. I met him head-on, steel clashing against steel, the force of the impact rattling up my arm. All hell broke loose. Blades flashed. Blood spattered. The sound of battle echoed through the trees. And then. A blur of silver. I barely registered it in time, just a flicker of movement at the edge of my vision before Lou was shoved aside, just as a dagger sailed toward his chest. A dagger that would have struck true. If she hadn't stopped it. Kala stood there, breathing hard, her own blade still raised from where she had parried the strike meant for Lou. For a moment, everything slowed. She was here. Lou was staring at her, eyes wide with disbelief. And then. The battle raged on, and we had no choice but to keep fighting. The battlefield was chaos, clashing steel, grunts of pain, the dull thud of bodies hitting the ground. But amidst it all, Lou and Kala stood frozen, locked in something far more dangerous than blades. Their bond was a live wire between them, crackling, demanding. But Kala wrenched her gaze away first. She turned back to the fight, her body a blur as she deflected another attack, her movements precise, effortless. She moved like someone who had trained for war her whole life, who knew nothing else but survival. Lou snapped out of his trance just in time to sidestep a sword aimed at his ribs. With a vicious snarl, he drove his elbow into his attacker's face, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted. A sickening crack echoed as the bounty hunter crumpled to the ground. I was barely holding my own against 2 of them when Kane's blade whizzed past my ear, embedding itself in the throat of the man to my right. Try to keep up, he muttered, already turning to his next opponent. I shot him a glare but had no time for retorts. Kala was a shadow among the chaos, weaving through attackers with a brutal kind of grace. She moved like a predator, each strike measured and merciless. A flick of her wrist, and another bounty hunter fell, clutching a gaping wound at his side. She was killing them. No hesitation, no second thoughts. And yet. She hadn't touched Lou again. Not once. Even when the battle pressed them close, she maneuvered away, keeping her distance like her life depended on it. Lou noticed. And it was driving him insane. By the time the last bounty hunter hit the dirt, his face was carved in frustration. His knuckles were white from clenching his fists too tightly. Kala straightened, flipping her dagger in her hand before sliding it into the sheath at her hip. She turned to leave. Wait, Lou growled. She stilled but didn't turn. You're just gonna walk away? Again. Lou's voice was raw, edged with something dangerous. You saved my life, but you won't even look at me. Kala exhaled sharply, tilting her head slightly to the side, but still, she didn't meet his gaze. It was a mistake, she said. Lou flinched like she'd struck him. A mistake. She turned then, finally meeting his eyes, and for the first time, I saw it. The war inside her. A battle of willpower and instinct, of something she desperately wanted to deny but couldn't escape. You shouldn't have touched me, she said, voice tight. You shouldn't have been there. Lou's jaw clenched. I didn't exactly plan for a bounty hunter to try and gut me. Kala crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. You should leave the wastes. Kane chuckled under his breath, wiping his blade on the shirt of a dead man. Yeah, see, that's not happening. Kala's sharp gaze flicked to him. He only raised an eyebrow. You know who we are. You wouldn't have come back if you didn't. Her lips pressed together, her shoulders stiff. Kane was right. She had run from Lou, rejected the bond, but when danger came for him, she had returned. Even now, she wasn't walking away, not really. She was waiting. For what, I wasn't sure. Lou took a step forward. Tell me why, he said, quieter now. Kala's fingers curled into fists. Because I don't want this, she said. I never did. Lou's face hardened. Too bad. She scowled. You think you can just claim me and be done with it? That this bond erases everything else. I think the bond exists for a reason, Lu shot back. Kala scoffed, shaking her head. She turned sharply on her heel. Stay out of my way. And then she was gone, vanishing into the shadows of the wastes, leaving behind nothing but the lingering scent of steel and storm. Silence settled in her absence. Lu let out a slow breath, his hands flexing at his sides. I didn't say anything. Kane, however, smirked. She's hooked, he said. Lu whipped his head toward him, eyes blazing. The fuck are you talking about? Kane chuckled, unbothered. She didn't have to save you. Didn't have to come back. Didn't have to stay and argue. He tilted his head. She's fighting it, yeah. But not because she doesn't want it. Lu narrowed his eyes. Kane only shrugged. She's scared. That shut Lu up. Chapter 12. Just as we were about to continue our search for the warlock, a rustle in the trees caught my attention. I froze, my hand instinctively going to my blade. My body tensed, ready for the next fight, but the form that stepped into view was all too familiar. Kala. Her dark silver hair shimmered in the dim light as she emerged from the forest, her leather-clad form moving with the same fluidity and grace she'd displayed earlier. Her eyes locked on Lu with a heat that was impossible to ignore, but her expression was unreadable, tight with restraint, but the conflict still smoldered beneath. The moment she took a step closer, I felt the shift. The way the air around us seemed to thicken with something more potent than just the tension between them. I wasn't sure if she'd come to apologize, to explain herself, or to continue the argument they'd left hanging. But she was here, and it was clear she wasn't going to walk away this time. Kane, ever the one for smirking commentary, raised an eyebrow. Well, looks like someone's not done with us after all. I shot him a quick glance, but my attention was back on Kala. She stopped just a few paces from Lu, her gaze never leaving him. The silence stretched between them, heavy, thick, the words unsaid hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Lu took a step forward, cautiously, as though not wanting to make the first move but knowing something needed to change. Kala, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos of his emotions. What are you doing? She didn't answer. Instead, in a swift motion, she reached for the dagger at her hip, pulling it out with a sharp, practiced movement. In one breath, she closed the distance between them and pressed the cold steel to his throat. I'm not leaving this time, she said, her voice low but clear. Her fingers tightened around the hilt of the blade, a silent threat that held more than just physical danger. It was a warning of something deeper, something she was still trying to hold back. Lu didn't flinch, his chest rising and falling with each breath, his eyes never leaving hers. He held his ground, but there was something different about the way he stood now, no longer the unsure man caught between two worlds, but someone who was ready to face whatever came next. And then, without warning, she dropped the dagger to the ground with a soft clink, stepping closer until there was barely an inch between them. Her breath caught in her throat before she surged forward, her lips crashing into his. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was aggressive, desperate almost, like the bond between them had finally reached its breaking point, and now neither of them could hold back any longer. Her hands gripped his shoulders, pulling him closer as if she could erase the distance that had existed between them since their first encounter. For a long, breathless moment, everything else faded away. The war, the chaos, the tension, they all disappeared into the kiss. And in that moment, the bond between them flared into life with a ferocity neither of them had expected. The bond pulsed, thrumming through their veins, raw and powerful. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing heavily, their eyes wide and searching, as though they were still trying to understand what had just happened. Kala's hand trembled slightly at her side, and Lu, for the first time since they'd met, looked at peace. She stepped back, but this time, she didn't leave. She didn't turn away. Instead, she stood beside Lu, her eyes now open, though still guarded. We move forward, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it, but still with an edge. Together. But I need to know more. About who you are, who I'm meant to stand beside. Kane grinned, folding his arms across his chest. Looks like Lu's got himself a new companion, he said, his tone teasing but with a hint of approval. I shot him a glare, but even I couldn't ignore the tension that had broken, the new chapter that had started between Lu and Kala. Are we done here? I asked, taking a step forward. The warlock is still out there. Our quest is far from over. And the sooner we got moving, the better. Kala nodded, her hand resting lightly on the dagger at her side, her gaze flickering to me. Let's go. Without another word, we gathered ourselves, moving in sync despite the chaos that had come before. As we walked into the heart of the wastes, our group now just a little more complicated, a little more bonded than before, we knew the road ahead would be treacherous. But with the bond between Lu and Kala ignited, With the stakes higher than ever, there was no turning back now. The council had no idea what they were about to face. Chapter 13. We walked, and we talked. Well, I did most of the talking. Calla was silent at first, keeping a steady pace beside us, her sharp eyes scanning the darkness, the tension still coiled tight in her frame. But she was here. She had come back. And that meant something, whether she wanted to admit it or not. I decided to put her up to speed, long story short. So, I started, gesturing vaguely as we trudged through the uneven terrain, me and Lou. Human. Completely, utterly, frustratingly human. And this world, the same one that throws mate bonds around like a sick cosmic joke, decided it would be fun to match humans with supernaturals. Just to keep things interesting, I guess. Calla glanced at me, arching a brow. I smirked. I got bonded a few days ago. With him. I jerked my chin toward Kane, who gave an exaggerated wave. Kane, resident vampire, and pain in my ass. Charming, Kane muttered. Calla's gaze flickered between us, calculating. But your eyes. Yeah. About that, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. Kane came with 2 sweet bundles of joy orchids. They gifted me some powers. What those powers actually are? No clue. How to use them? Even less of a clue. Calla's expression didn't change, but I could tell she was absorbing every word, filing them away. And then, I continued, our dear friend, Ness, got bonded with my son. My baby son. A domper. And as you can probably guess, the council didn't like that very much. So, they sent their leeches right to our doorstep. Turns out, a bond between a human and a supernatural? It's rare. And when it happens, it's powerful. They want to control it, maybe even break it. Calla's gaze darkened slightly, something unreadable flickering across her face. And now, for the grand finale, I gestured to Lou, then to her. Now you're in the mix. Another supernatural. Another bond. I gave her a pointed look. Welcome to the nut house, sister. For a second, she didn't react. Then, to my surprise, she let out a soft, breathy laugh. That's one way to put it. Lou, who had been mostly quiet, probably still processing everything she had said before, finally spoke up. What are you? He asked, his voice steady but edged with something deeper. Calla hesitated. Not because she was hiding, but because she was deciding how much to share. Then, with a small tilt of her head, she answered. I'm a blade dancer. Kane whistled under his breath. Lou frowned. A what? Calla's lips curled slightly. Someone very skilled with any blade, she explained, her fingers brushing over the hilt of the dagger at her hip. I can enchant my weapons, imbue them with power and chance. My blades cut deeper than steel alone. A well-placed strike can shatter enchantments, sever magic. I'm a fighter, an assassin of sorts. With a hint of mystic power. A silence settled between us. Then Kane huffed a short laugh. So, not just deadly. Magically deadly. Calla shrugged. Something like that. Lou stared at her a moment longer, then exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. Great. Just great. The weight of everything was pressing down on all of us, exhaustion creeping in. We needed rest. Ahead, the ruins of an old building loomed, its skeletal remains barely standing against the wind. The remnants of what used to be a store, shelves toppled, glass shattered, a faint rusted sign hanging by a thread. This will do for the night, Kane announced, stepping over the rubble. Not the worst place I've slept. I snorted. That's not saying much. We made our way inside. The air was thick with dust, and the floor was littered with debris, but it was shelter. We started setting up as best we could, brushing aside broken wood and finding places to sit. Calla remained standing near the entrance, arms crossed, watching. I met her gaze. Tomorrow, we find that damn warlock. She nodded, but her eyes flickered toward Lou for the briefest moment before she turned away, sinking into the shadows. And somehow, I had a feeling this was only the beginning. Chapter 14. The wind outside howled through the cracks in the walls, a reminder that the world beyond was still vast, still cruel, still waiting for us. But for now, we had a moment to breathe. Calla remained in the shadows, her arms crossed, her posture relaxed but alert. Lou sat against a broken shelf, stretching out his legs, staring at the ceiling as if it held all the answers he couldn't find. Kane and I found our own spots, the silence between us comfortable until Kane, of course, decided it was time for his usual brand of entertainment. He smirked, eyes flicking to Lou. She's ignoring you now, but at least she kissed you. Lou's entire body stiffened. Kane gestured at me. I didn't even get that. I rolled my eyes. Continue like that, and it'll never happen, I hissed, narrowing my gaze at him. Kane chuckled, shaking his head. I live in hope. Lou exhaled sharply, running a hand down his face. You two are insufferable. I grinned. And yet, here you are. Stuck with us. A beat of silence. Then Call's voice cut through the dim light. Get some rest. We move at dawn. No argument there. The exhaustion weighed on all of us, pressing down like a heavy blanket. One by one, we let sleep take us. Chapter 15. The sun was a weak glow behind thick clouds, casting a dull gray light over the ruined landscape. The cold had seeped into my bones during the night, and even now, I could feel the stiffness in my limbs as I stretched. Kane was already awake, crouched near what used to be a counter, sharpening one of his daggers with slow, meticulous strokes. He looked up as I stirred. Morning, sunshine. I groaned. Shut up. Lou was still half asleep, blinking blearily at the world like it had personally offended him. Calla, of course, was already on her feet, fully dressed and ready to go. Not a hair out of place. Eat something, she said, tossing a wrapped ration in my direction. We don't stop until we find that warlock. I caught it, sighing. You're a real morning person, huh? She gave me a look that suggested she could not care less about my suffering. Lou grumbled something about mornings being a curse as he sat up, rubbing his face. Kane, ever the opportunist, nudged him with his foot. Better get moving, lover boy, he teased. Wouldn't want to keep your mate waiting. Lou shot him a glare that could have peeled paint off the walls. Kane just smirked. I ignored them, finishing my ration quickly. We had bigger problems than Kane's need to be an ass. The warlock we were looking for was supposed to be nearby if our information was right. And if it wasn't, well, we'd deal with that later. We gathered our things, checked our weapons, and stepped back onto the road. The wind had died down, but the sky above remained heavy and dark, like a storm waiting to break. And somehow, I had the sinking feeling that whatever we found today was going to change everything. We moved swiftly, cutting through the remnants of what had once been a town. The buildings here were nothing but broken shells, their skeletal remains jutting out against the overcast sky like the ribs of some long-dead beast. The waste had swallowed this place whole, leaving nothing but dust and ghosts. Calla led the way, her movements precise and measured, as if she had walked this path 100 times before. Lou kept close behind her, his jaw tight, frustration lingering in every step. Kane and I followed, keeping a loose formation, our eyes scanning the ruins for any sign of movement. So, where exactly are we supposed to find this warlock? Lou asked, twirling a dagger between his fingers. Calla didn't slow down. There's an old temple just past the ridge, she said. If he's still around, that's where he'll be. Great, I muttered. Because temples aren't ominous or anything. Lou smirked. Maybe he's the friendly kind of warlock. The tea brewing, prophecy giving, definitely not trying to kill us kind. Kane scoffed. And maybe the council decided to give up and retire to a nice little farm. Lou sighed. I miss optimism. I snorted but didn't take my eyes off the path ahead. The closer we got, the heavier the air felt, thick with something unseen, something that prickled against my skin like the weight of an unspoken warning. Calla must have felt it too because she slowed, one hand hovering over the hilt of her dagger. Magic, she muttered. It's thick here. Lou frowned, rubbing at the back of his neck. Yeah. It feels wrong. I shivered. I wasn't sensitive to magic the way supernatural beings were, but even I could feel the unnatural stillness pressing in around us. Chapter 16. The ruins of the temple loomed ahead, its once grand stone pillars now crumbling, vines twisting through the cracks like veins. The entrance yawned open before us, a dark void that seemed to swallow the light. Calla exhaled slowly, drawing one of her blades. Stay close. If he's here, he already knows we're coming. Lou gave an exaggerated sigh. Why do warlocks never just say hello like normal people? No one answered. Because the moment we stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind us. And then the whispers started. The whispers slithered through the air, curling around us like unseen fingers. They weren't words at least, not in any language I recognized. Just a murmur of voices layered over one another, some low and guttural, others light and sharp, like laughter turned inside out. I reached for Kane on instinct. His fingers brushed mine, cold but grounding. Lou shifted beside me, his entire body tense, eyes darting through the gloom. Calla, blade drawn, stood perfectly still, her breathing steady despite the way the shadows curled unnaturally around her. Then, a voice cut through the whispers, deep and almost amused. You bring quite the collection of souls to my doorstep. The air around us pulsed, like something breathing. And from the darkness ahead, a figure emerged. He was tall, draped in robes that shimmered between black and deep violet, shifting like ink in water. His hair was long, silver-threaded black, and his skin was the shade of old parchment pale, but etched with lines of power that glowed faintly beneath the surface. His eyes, they were wrong. Too deep, too dark, as if they held the abyss itself. Kala took a step forward, blade raised. "We're not here to play games, warlock." The man, if he was even truly a man, tilted his head, a slow, deliberate motion. "A blade dancer," he mused. "Rare. And yet, I see doubt in your hands." His gaze flicked to Lou, and something in his expression sharpened. "And you are interesting." Lou stiffened. "Not interested." The warlock smiled, and the room seemed to darken further. "Oh, but you will be." Kane let out a tired sigh. "Here we go." I nudged him, but my focus remained locked on the warlock. "We need information," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to know how to track the council, how to stop them before they send more of their leeches after us." The warlock regarded me, and for a moment, I thought he might laugh. Instead, he studied me carefully, his gaze dipping to my hands, to my chest, lingering just long enough to make me uneasy. Then his lips curled. "You carry old magic, though you do not yet understand it." I froze. Kane's fingers twitched toward his weapon, but the warlock lifted a hand lazily. "Do not bother. If I wanted you dead, you would already be bleeding." Lou growled. "Try it and see how that goes for you." The warlock ignored him, his gaze returning to me. "Your power is young. Unshaped. But it is not yours alone, is it?" My breath caught. "The twins." He knew. His smile deepened. "Ah. Now you understand." Kala shifted impatiently. "Enough riddles. Will you help us or not?" The warlock was silent for a moment, considering. Then, with an almost bored sigh, he flicked his fingers, and the torches around the temple burst to life, golden flames casting eerie shadows along the ruined walls. "I will give you what you seek," he said. "But nothing is free." Kane exhaled sharply. "Of course it isn't." I ignored him. "What do you want?" The warlock's lips parted in a slow, cruel smile. "A favor?" Something about the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. "Be specific," Kala warned. The warlock chuckled. "A simple task. One that will, in the end, benefit you as much as it does me." He turned slightly, gesturing toward the far end of the temple, where an archway stood half buried in rubble. "There is something I need retrieved. An artifact. Lost beneath the ruins of this temple, where even I cannot go." Lou crossed his arms. "And why, exactly, can't you go get it yourself?" The warlock's smile didn't waver. "Because it does not wish to be found by me." Silence stretched between us. Lou glanced at me. I glanced at Kane. Kane, for once, looked genuinely uneasy. Kala, however, was already moving. "Fine," she said. "Tell us where to go." The warlock's eyes gleamed. "Brave little blade dancer," he murmured. "Follow the path beneath the altar. If you survive, return to me with the artifact, and I will give you what you seek." I swallowed hard. Something told me we weren't going to like what was waiting for us down there. The warlock made a lazy gesture toward the far end of the temple, where the massive stone altar loomed. The torches along the walls flickered in response, their light elongating the shadows that stretched across the cracked marble floors. Beneath the altar, half hidden by debris and time, lay a stairway. It plunged into darkness, yawning like a mouth waiting to swallow us whole. I exhaled slowly. Of course it's underground. Because this wasn't dangerous enough already. Lou peered down into the abyss. "So, let me guess. No torches, no light, possibly traps, and definitely some sort of nightmare creature waiting to rip us apart." The warlock's lips curved slightly. "Something like that." Kala didn't hesitate. She slid a dagger from her belt and moved toward the steps, her expression set in grim determination. "Let's just get this over with." I hesitated. "What exactly are we looking for?" The warlock tilted his head slightly, watching me like one might observe a particularly interesting insect. "A fragment," he said, voice smooth as glass. "A shard of something, old. You will know it when you see it." "Vague," Kane muttered. "That's promising." I turned back to the stairs. The air that spilled from the passage was stale, thick with the scent of dust and something else, something bitter, metallic. Blood. It was old, but it was there. A warning, maybe. Or a promise. Still, we had no choice but to move. One by one, we descended into the darkness. Chapter 17. The steps were uneven, carved from the same stone as the temple, but worn by time and, if I had to guess, things moving through here over the centuries. The deeper we went, the more the air thickened, turning heavy in my lungs. There was no light. Not even the faintest glimmer from above. Just endless blackness pressing in from all sides. Remind me why we're doing this. Lou muttered behind me. Because the warlock has answers, I said. Yeah, and we'll be dead before we get to hear them, Lou added. Calla ignored us both, leading the way with the kind of confidence that made me think she'd walked into worse places before. Then, suddenly, she stopped. I barely caught myself before slamming into her back. What? She didn't answer immediately. But a moment later, I heard it too. A click. Then a low, grinding sound, stone shifting against stone. And then, the floor beneath us dropped. I barely had time to curse before I was free falling into the dark. The impact wasn't gentle. I hit the ground hard, air knocked from my lungs. Dust and grit filled my mouth, and for a few disoriented seconds, all I could hear was my own heartbeat thundering in my skull. Then, ow, Lou groaned somewhere to my right. I think I broke my ass. You can't break your ass. I coughed. Then something's definitely cracked. A bit further away, Kane was muttering something very creative under his breath, while Calla was already on her feet, blade drawn, eyes scanning the darkness. I pushed myself up, ignoring the bruises already forming. Everyone alive. No thanks to this death trap, Kane grumbled. Lou groaned again. Yeah, mostly alive. Calla's voice cut through the murmuring. Shut up. We're not alone. Silence. Then, a rustle. A skittering sound. It echoed from the far end of the chamber we had fallen into, something shifting just beyond our sight. I tensed. That's not good. Lou exhaled. No. No, it really isn't. And then the whispering began. Not from a single voice. Not even from just a few. But from many. The same murmurs we'd heard upstairs, only now, they were all around us. Closer. More urgent. A shape moved in the dark. Then another. Then many. My stomach twisted. We need to move, Calla said, voice low, steady. Now. Kane unsheathed his blades. Yeah. Before they do. I didn't ask what they were. I just ran. We all did. Calla led the charge, navigating the dark with sharp precision, her movements fluid, effortless. Kane was close behind her, blades at the ready, his steps eerily silent despite the uneven ground. Lou, nursing what he claimed was a shattered ass, kept pace beside me, cursing under his breath but moving fast enough to prove he'd survive. The chamber around us was vast, but the whispering figures were closing in fast. Too fast. Their shapes flickered at the edge of my vision, shifting like shadows caught between worlds, humanoid, but stretched, distorted, wrong. Then, suddenly, a hand, not a hand, shot out of the dark. I twisted at the last second, barely avoiding the clawed fingers that raked through the air where my throat had been. A guttural hiss followed, the sound of something hungry. Shit. I stumbled, caught myself, and kept running. Calla's blade flashed in the dark. A sharp snicked, and something fell away with a wet thud. The whispering turned into a shriek. They're corporeal, she snapped. Keep moving. Kane let out a low, amused hum. Oh, good. I was hoping we could kill them. A moment later, his twin daggers sliced through the dark. The air shuddered with another cry as something else collapsed behind us. But for every one we cut down, more replaced them. The air turned thicker, heavier, like wading through invisible chains. My chest tightened. My lungs struggled. Shit, Lou gasped, stumbling beside me. I can't breathe. It wasn't just him. I felt it too. A slow, creeping suffocation. A pull. Calla's eyes flicked back, narrowed. They're draining us. Kane swore. Then we need to. The ground vanished. No warning. No time to react. Just a sheer drop. And then we were falling. Again. Again. The world spiraled. Stone blurred past. And then. Impact. Hard. Pain exploded through my body. And then. Nothing. Just silence. Just dark. Just. A voice. Low. Whispered. Ancient. You should not have come here. The darkness shuddered. And the real nightmare began. Chapter 18. The voice slithered through the darkness, curling around my bones like smoke. It wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It was the dark, the weight pressing down on my chest, the tremor in my pulse. I forced a breath into my aching lungs, blinking past the haze clouding my vision. My body felt like it had been shaken loose, every limb heavy and unresponsive. Then movement. I turned my head just enough to see Lou groaning beside me, struggling onto his elbows. Okay, he wheezed. I think I'm actually dead now. You're talking, Kane muttered from somewhere behind him. You're not dead. You don't know that. Maybe this is hell. Kane let out a dry chuckle. If it is, it's disappointingly predictable. A sharp inhale snapped my attention back to Kala. She was already on her feet, of course she was, blades drawn, muscles tight with tension. She wasn't looking at us. She was looking at him. The warlock, the real one. He was exactly what I hadn't been expecting. Not ancient. Not a withered old hermit hunched over a crooked staff. No. He stood tall in the center of the chamber, bathed in the faint glow of something unseen, his robes dark and flowing like the night itself. His face was shadowed, ageless, sharp eyes black as a starless void, gazing at us with something that was not quite contempt, but close. You should not have come here, he repeated, his voice carrying no more weight than a whisper. Kane rolled his shoulders, the blades in his hands glinting even in the dimness. Yeah, well. We're stubborn like that. The warlock didn't react. Didn't move. But something did. The shadows around him stirred. A ripple, barely visible. A whisper in a language I still didn't understand, but that made my blood curdle. We need answers, I said, forcing myself to stand despite the protest of every muscle in my body. You need to leave, the warlock corrected. Before the temple decides to keep you. Lou exhaled sharply. That's a thing. The temple just keeps people. A slow smile curved across the warlock's lips. It is now. The shadows coiled. Shifted. And then the walls breathed. Stone moved, warping like flesh, like something living. The whispers grew louder, not from him. Not from the figures that had chased us here. From the temple itself. Shit, Kala muttered. He's not lying. The warlock tilted his head slightly, considering her. You are more perceptive than the others. Yeah, she said, grip tightening on her blade. And you're pissing me off. So maybe start talking. For the first time, his expression flickered just the faintest trace of amusement. Then he sighed. Very well. Ask your questions. But know this, there are some truths you would be better off not knowing. I narrowed my eyes. Wait a second. I thought we already met you. Lou made a noise of agreement. Yeah. Up top. All cryptic and mysterious, told us to get a fragment, but here you are. So, what gives? The warlock studied me for a moment, unreadable. Then he exhaled, a soundless thing that felt more like a shift in the air than an actual breath. That was a shadow of myself, he said. A guide to bring you here. I cannot leave these depths. Lou muttered something under his breath, and I had a feeling it wasn't polite. I crossed my arms. And this fragment you sent us after. His lips twitched, but the amusement didn't reach his eyes. The fragment was not an object, he said softly. It was me. Silence. Cold, eerie silence. My skin prickled. I'm sorry, what? He lifted a hand, gesturing vaguely at the temple around us. Once, I was whole. But time has a way of unraveling things. This place, it took pieces of me, scattered them throughout itself, so that I could never truly leave. You met only a fraction of my essence above a sliver, barely sentient. A memory given form. Lou exhaled sharply. That's okay. That's deeply unsettling. It is reality, the warlock said simply. And you are wasting time. Kala, who had been silent until now, took a step forward. Then let's get to the point, she said. How do we defeat the council? The warlock considered her. You assume you can. Kane made a low, unimpressed sound. We didn't come all this way to assume. A pause. Then the warlock smiled, sharp, dark, unreadable. Very well. Listen carefully. The air in the chamber grew heavier, crackling with something unseen. The council's power does not rest in their numbers, nor in their magic alone, he said. It is in their roots. They are tied to something far older than themselves, something ancient and hungry. It is what gives them dominion over this world. And it is what you must sever. A chill ran down my spine. What is it? He tilted his head. You will not like the answer. Try me. The warlock's smile widened. The bond. The room felt like it dropped 10 degrees. What bond? Lou asked warily. The mate bond, the warlock murmured, voice like silk over steel. It is not a gift. It never was. It is a chain. A tether. A control. And it has ensured the council's rule for centuries. I felt Kane tense beside me. Felt my own stomach twist. That's not possible, I said. Is it not? The warlock's voice was quiet, but there was something in it. Something dark. Tell me, when has a mate bond ever freed someone? I opened my mouth. Closed it again. Lou, for once, was silent. The warlock stepped closer, his shadow stretching unnaturally across the stone. The bonds were designed to bind you. To control who wields power and who does not. To dictate strength. Loyalty. Fate. They are the roots of the council's dominion. And they are what must be burned if you wish to destroy them. Kala's voice was careful, measured. You're saying we have to break them. Not just break them, the warlock said. You must end them. For all. Something cold settled in my chest. That's impossible, Lou said. Mate bonds are, they're fundamental. They just exist. Because you allow them to, the warlock countered. Because no one has ever dared to undo them. Kane's voice was low, thoughtful. And how, exactly, do we do that? The warlock gave a slow, knowing smile. If you survive long enough to leave this place, he said, I will tell you. A new sound shivered through the chamber. The walls shifted. The temple breathed. And the whispering voices turned into a roar. The warlock watched us, his expression unreadable as the echoes of the temple rumbled around us. If you wish to sever the council's power, you must go to the origin, he said. The first site. The place where the bonds were woven into the fabric of your world. I frowned. Where? His gaze darkened. The Vale of Etheris. Lou groaned. That sounds like a place that wants to eat us. It does, the warlock said simply. And it will, if you are not careful. I exhaled sharply. Great. And what exactly do we need to do when we get there? You must sever the thread of dominion, the binding force that ties all mate bonds to the council's control. Kala's expression barely flickered, but I saw the slight narrowing of her eyes. How? You will find the thread at the heart of Etheris, he said. It is ancient. Guarded. Woven into the very essence of supernatural existence. Lou snorted. So, just a casual death mission. Cool, cool. Kane's voice was calm, controlled. What happens if we succeed? The warlock tilted his head, something almost amused in his gaze. Then the council's power will crumble. The chains they forged will be no more. And the world will be rewritten. A shiver crawled down my spine. Something didn't add up. I took a slow step forward. If mate bonds were created to control us, then why is the council coming after us now? After we've found our bonds. The warlock laughed. Low. Amused. Dark. I stiffened as his gaze settled on me. Silly little human girl, he murmured. Not so human anymore. I swallowed. His eyes gleamed. The bonds were never meant to cross between species. Humans and supernatural beings are not meant to be bound together. You, he gestured toward me, then to Lou, then to Kane and Kala, all of you, your bonds crossed the lines. You transcended the rules. And the council does not like loose ends. A sharp silence fell between us. Lou inhaled. That's concerning. Kane's jaw tightened. So, they're not just trying to control us. They're trying to erase us. The warlock smiled, slow and knowing. Now you understand. Something moved. The temple trembled. The walls groaned, shifting, twisting, closing in. Time's up, Kala muttered. I turned back to the warlock. How do we get out? His smile widened. You'll figure it out. And then. He vanished. The chamber lurched. The stone beneath us cracked. Run, Kane snapped. We ran. Chapter 19. The walls collapsed behind us, shadows unraveling from the stone, clawing toward us. The ground split beneath our feet, deep chasms opening into the endless dark. Kala was ahead, her movements swift and sure, leading us through the crumbling ruin. A chunk of ceiling gave way. I barely dodged, feeling the rush of stone too close to my skull. Lou grabbed my arm, hauling me forward. Faster. Kane was right behind us, his speed supernatural, eyes gleaming in the dim light. The entrance was ahead. Just a few more feet. A shadow lunged. Teeth. Claws. A shape barely seen in the swirling dark. Kala spun, her blade flashing. A single strike, and the creature collapsed. The exit was right there. I leapt. Darkness swallowed us whole. And then. We burst into the light. I hit the ground hard, rolling through the dust and grit, coughing as the temple sealed shut behind us. Silence. Just our harsh breathing, the weight of the sky overhead, the scent of dust and old magic in the air. Lou groaned. I think I left my soul back there. Kane exhaled. We got what we came for. Kala sheathed her blade. Then let's finish this. I nodded, brushing dirt from my face. We had a war to win. And now, we knew exactly how to do it. I pushed myself upright, brushing the dust from my clothes as my heart finally slowed. Lou was still lying flat on his back, staring at the sky like it personally offended him. So. I vote we never do that again. Kane huffed out a breath. Noted. Kala exhaled slowly, scanning the ruins of the temple, like she was waiting for something else to lunge at us. When nothing did, she sheathed her blade and turned to me. Let's get moving. I met her gaze, then glanced at Kane. We need to finish this, I said. But before we march into the den of vipers, we need a plan. And considering the heart of Etheris is on the opposite end of the continent past the wastes, past our town, we're going to need to strategize. Kane nodded, his expression unreadable. Then we stop by the apartment first. Lou perked up instantly. Oh, thank God. Kala frowned slightly. Are you sure that's wise? If the council knows we survived, they could be watching your home. They already know we survived, Kane said flatly. If they wanted to ambush us, they would have done it here, while we were weak. Kala considered that, then gave a curt nod. Fair point. Lou exhaled. It's not just for rest. We need to eat, regroup, and figure out how we're going to infiltrate Etheris. And, I added, we need to see our dompiers. My chest tightened at the thought of our little ones. Nessa too. I had no doubt she was taking care of them, but it had been days since I last held them, since I last saw their tiny faces scrunch up in that adorable way that made my heart ache. I needed to see them. I needed to know they were safe. Kane must have sensed my thoughts because his hand brushed against mine, fleeting, the smallest touch, but it was grounding nonetheless. Then we go home, he said. Rest. And when we're ready, we burn Etheris to the ground, Lou finished, eyes glinting. Kala hummed. That part I'm looking forward to. I huffed out a breath, shaking my head. Then let's move. We turned toward home, toward the apartment, toward the calm before the storm. Because once we set foot in Etheris, there would be no turning back. Chapter 20. The city was quiet when we arrived, too quiet. The streets, once familiar, felt like the hushed inhale before a storm, like something unseen lingered just beyond the edges of my perception. It was probably paranoia, but after everything we had just been through, I wasn't taking chances. Kane entered first, his movements fluid, silent. Kala followed, eyes sharp, already scanning for threats. Lou, well, he was the least subtle, but he cared the least about subtlety. He walked in like he owned the damn place. And me? I just held my breath. Then. A gasp. You're back. Small footsteps. A blur of movement. Then two warm bodies collided into me at full force. I dropped to my knees, arms wrapping around my dompiers before I could think. They weren't babies anymore, they were small toddlers already. Their little hands clung to me, tiny fists gripping my jacket, their faces burying into my neck. I inhaled, breathing them in, grounding myself in their scent, their presence, their reality. You're late, one of them murmured into my shoulder, her tiny voice sleepy, accusing. I swallowed hard. I know, sweetheart. I know. I felt another body press against me, a different warmth. Kane had dropped down beside me, his arms encircling our children as well. For a moment, none of us spoke. The apartment felt safe, like home. Then. All right, move over before you make me cry. I looked up, finding Nessa standing in the doorway, arms crossed, trying and failing to mask the emotion in her eyes. You're allowed to cry, you know, I told her. She huffed. Not before you all eat something. You look like hell. I gave her a weak smile. That bad? Nessa snorted. Worse. Get in here. I made stew. Warmth, food, and a moment of laughter. The table was small, barely big enough for all of us, but it felt full. Stew steamed in mismatched bowls. Bread, still warm, was torn apart with greedy hands. Even Lou, who usually had something to complain about, was too busy stuffing his face to whine. Kane ate in quiet focus, movements slow, deliberate. Kala, well, she was watching Lou like he was some kind of anomaly. I smirked. Something wrong? Kala raised a brow. I've just never seen someone inhale food with that much enthusiasm. Lou wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. It's called appreciation. You should try it sometime. Kala scoffed. I appreciate food. I just chew it first. Nessa snorted into her cup. Kane shook his head. This is what we fought our way through a temple for. Lou pointed his spoon at him. You're just mad you didn't think of it first. For a moment, just a moment, it felt normal. No warlocks. No council. No looming battles. Just warmth. Just family. I let myself breathe it in, memorizing it. Because I knew, deep down, that moments like this, they wouldn't last forever. When the bowls were empty and the fire had burned low, we turned to business. Kala unrolled a rough map across the table. The heart of Etheris is heavily fortified. No one gets in without clearance, and no one gets out without permission. Lou hummed. Sounds like an invitation to break in. Kane ignored him. The main entry points will be impossible. Too many guards, too much security. But, there are weaknesses. Places they don't expect an attack from. I leaned forward. Like. Kala tapped a point on the map. The underground tunnels. Old escape routes built during the first wars. Half of them are abandoned. The other half, well, we'll find out. Nessa folded her arms. And when you get inside. Silence. Then. We sever the source. The warlock's words still burned in my mind. Cut the ties at the root. Destroy what binds them together. The council's power relied on those bonds. And if we shattered them, they'd fall. Lou exhaled. All right. So, we sneak in, break the source, and get out alive. Sounds easy. Kala smirked. Famous last words. Chapter 21. The plan was set. The next few days would be spent preparing. For now. We slept. Or, at least, most of us did. I curled up with the twins, Kane's presence a familiar weight behind me. And across the apartment. Lou and Kala? They were definitely not sleeping. It started as a whisper. A muffled sound barely there. Then a gasp. A laugh. Then a very distinct thud. Seriously. Kane groaned into his pillow. Just let them be. I muffled my snort. He grumbled something about walls being too thin. Another sound. A lot louder. Lou's voice low, breathless. Kala's laughter wicked, wild. I swear to the gods, Kane exhaled sharply. Just sleep, I murmured, barely suppressing a laugh. Kane huffed, muttering something about killing Lou if he kept him up all night. But despite the complaints, I couldn't begrudge them. We had so few moments like this. So few moments to just be human. Even if Lou and Kala were, being very, very human. And so, with exhaustion finally dragging me under, I let it be. Let the world fade away. Because tomorrow, we'd be warriors again. But tonight? Tonight, we were just us. Chapter 22. The scent of coffee and something vaguely resembling pancakes filled the apartment. It wasn't much, just a haphazard meal thrown together with whatever we had left, but it was warm, and right now, that was enough. Kane sat across from me, black coffee in hand, looking far too composed for someone who had spent half the night complaining about Lou and Kala's enthusiasm. And speaking of them, Lou sauntered in like he owned the place, stretching with the kind of smug satisfaction that made Kane roll his eyes. Kala followed, looking far less phased but undeniably more at ease than before. Kane exhaled loudly, setting his mug down with deliberate slowness. So, he drawled. How are the newlyweds? Why, Kane, I didn't know you cared. Lou smirked. Nessa, who had just entered the kitchen, snorted. I think he's referring to the fact that the entire apartment heard you too. Kala, utterly unbothered, grabbed a mug and poured herself coffee. Good. I barely suppressed my laugh as Kane pinched the bridge of his nose. Some of us were trying to sleep. Lou gave him an innocent look. Oh. Were we too loud? Kane leveled him with a flat look. Lou, I thought a demon was trying to claw its way through the walls. I choked on my coffee. Nessa didn't even crack a smile. You'll be cleaning the sheets. That wiped Lou's grin off his face. Kala, on the other hand, was unfazed as ever. The teasing faded after a while, the conversation shifting into quieter waters. Nessa stirred her tea, her brow furrowed. If we sever the thread of dominion, what happens to us? The room stilled. I glanced at Kane. At Lou. At Kala. None of us had an answer. Lou leaned back in his chair. We break the council's hold, we break their control. That's the plan. Yes, Nessa said, looking up. But what about your bonds? What about all of you? My stomach twisted. Kane's fingers curled slightly around his mug, his expression unreadable. Kala was the first to speak. The warlock said our bonds were twisted. She spoke slowly, carefully, as if piecing it together in real time. That they shouldn't have happened. That we weren't supposed to be like this. But we are, I murmured. Kala met my gaze. We are. Nessa exhaled. So, if these bonds aren't normal, if they aren't part of the system, do they break when the system does? Silence. Kane was staring at the Dompiers, who were playing on the floor, blissfully unaware. I don't know, Kala admitted. But, she hesitated, then shook her head. If we were never meant to have these bonds in the first place, then maybe they exist beyond the council's reach. I watched her carefully. You came back for us, I said softly. To help us. Even before you bonded with Lou. She met my gaze. And nodded. Lou's smirk had faded entirely now. He looked at her with something deeper. Something that didn't need words. Kane exhaled, gaze still locked on the twins. Maybe, he murmured, some bonds transcend this control. Maybe some are truly meant to be. His eyes flicked to me, just for a second. Then back to the twins. And for the first time since this war had started, I wondered. Would we still be us when this was over? The room fell into a thoughtful silence after Kane's words. Some bonds transcend control. Some are meant to be. I let the thought settle in, watching the twins play. They were laughing, utterly unbothered by the weight of our conversation. Nessa sat with them, her fingers deftly untangling a strand of Cashin's dark hair while Amy tried to wrestle a piece of cloth from his hands. The simplicity of their world of their joy made my chest tighten. Lou cleared his throat. All right, so, theories aside, let's focus on what we actually know. The warlock told us where to go, what to sever, but we still don't know what happens to us once we do. We won't know until it happens, Calla said, arms crossed. But if we hesitate too long, the council won't give us the luxury of time. Kane exhaled sharply. She's right. We strategize, rest, and then we move. And by rest, you mean actual rest this time, Nessa said pointedly, eyeing Lou and Calla. Lou smirked, unbothered, but Calla just rolled her eyes, looking vaguely unimpressed. I'm a fast learner, she said dryly. Nessa arched a brow. Glad to hear it. But for real, if we do this, we need to be prepared for every possible outcome. No more distractions. I nodded. Agreed. We're going into Etheris, the heart of it all. We can't afford mistakes. Kane's gaze met mine, serious, assessing. Then let's get to it. No more stalling. It was time to end this. The last day in the apartment felt like something out of another life, like a memory we were trying to carve out before stepping into the unknown. There was an unspoken agreement between all of us to make the most of it, to hold on to what mattered before we threw ourselves into the fire. The evening passed in a blur of warmth and laughter, something we hadn't let ourselves indulge in for too long. Cashin and Amy, full of energy as ever, demanded our attention. Kane, despite his usual sharp wit and brooding nature, found himself trapped in some kind of ridiculous pretend battle with Cashin, who had declared himself the strongest vampire hunter in the land. Kane, of course, had no choice but to play the villain, snarling dramatically as Cashin tackled him, giggling uncontrollably. You wound me, little hunter, Kane groaned, sprawled out on the floor with exaggerated defeat. Cashin puffed out his chest. Told you I was strong. Amy, not to be left out, clambered onto Kane as well, her tiny hands pressing against his face. You have to stay down, she insisted. Kane huffed but let them pile on, muttering. This is absolutely undignified. You're being bested by two toddlers. I'd say it's exactly what you deserve. I grinned. Nessa snorted from where she sat curled up on the couch. Honestly, I could watch this all night. Lou, who had been lounging with Calla, smirked. I'd be more worried if they didn't win. Imagine Kane coming out of this victorious. The heartbreak. Kane shot him a glare but didn't shake the twins off. Instead, he let them proclaim their victory while Calla sat back, watching with something close to fond amusement. Eventually, Amy yawned, rubbing her eyes as she curled into my side. Cashin was barely holding himself upright, still fighting to stay awake. I ran my fingers through his unruly dark hair, voice soft. All right, you two. Time for bed. But Cashin pouted. No buts, Nessa said firmly. Come on, I'll tuck you in. The twins grumbled but didn't resist much as Nessa scooped Amy up and took Cashin's hand, leading them to the small bedroom they shared. For a moment, silence stretched in the living room. Not awkward, just waited. The reality of what came next sat heavy between us. I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my face. We leave at first light. Calla nodded. Through the tunnels. Lou stretched, eyes flickering with something unreadable. I can't believe we're actually doing this. Nessa returned then, arms crossed, leaning against the doorframe. You better all come back. Her voice was steady, but I saw the flicker of worry beneath her usual confidence. We will, Kane said without hesitation. I wanted to believe him. Needed to. I pushed myself up, letting exhaustion start to take hold. We should get some sleep. No one argued. One by one, we retreated to our rooms, though I doubted anyone would actually sleep soundly. Tomorrow, we walked into the unknown. Tonight, we let ourselves be whole, just for a little longer. Chapter 23. Morning came too soon. I woke to the faint sounds of movement, Kala shifting in the other room, Kane muttering something under his breath, Lou yawning loudly from across the hall. For a few blissful moments, I lay still, staring at the ceiling, pretending we weren't about to leave all of this behind. Then reality set in. I sighed, pushed myself up, and swung my legs over the edge of the bed. The air in the apartment was warm, carrying the scent of coffee and something crisp, probably whatever Nessa had thrown into the pan for breakfast. A small, ordinary thing that made my chest tighten. I found everyone gathered in the kitchen, where Nessa was plating up eggs and toast, her expression pinched like she was trying very hard not to look too concerned. Kane was already drinking his coffee, watching Lou with a smirk that spelled trouble. "Sleep well?" Kane asked, far too casual. Lou gave him a suspicious look, halfway through reaching for a slice of toast. "Yeah." Kane sipped his coffee, savoring the moment. "Really? That's interesting because, you see, the rest of us also heard just how well you slept." Lou froze, toast hovering midair. Kala, seated beside him, narrowed her eyes. "What?" "Oh, don't what me," Kane continued, delighting in Lou's discomfort. "Walls aren't that thick, you know, you really thought you were being quiet this time." I snorted into my cup of tea. "I don't think they cared." "Let them be, at least they are enjoying each other's presence." Nessa, however, did not look amused. She slid a plate onto the table in front of Lou with unnecessary force, then leveled him with a deadpan stare. Lou cleared his throat. Kala just shrugged. "Not our fault you all have super hearing." Kane grinned. "No, but it is your fault that I had to contemplate stabbing my own eardrums out." Okay, can we move on?" Lou groaned, shoving food into his mouth as if that would put an end to the conversation. Nessa rolled her eyes but finally let it drop, turning back to the stove. Unbelievable. Breakfast carried on with some light conversation, and more teasing. By the time it was over, the weight of what lay ahead settled over us like an unseen storm cloud. Dishes were cleared away, chairs scraped against the floor, and yet no one moved to leave just yet. Cashin and Amy clung to my legs, their tiny hands gripping tightly, as if they somehow knew this was goodbye for now, at least. "You're gonna come back, right?" Amy asked, looking up at me with wide, worried eyes. I knelt, brushing a curl from her face. "Of course we are, sweetheart. We always come back." I glanced at Kane, and for once, there was no teasing in his expression. He nodded, confirming the silent promise between us. Cashin, always the more serious of the two, studied me carefully before shifting his gaze to Kane. "You'll protect her, right?" His little voice held a fierce determination beyond his years. Kane crouched beside me, placing a firm hand on Cashin's shoulder. "With my life," he said simply, and Cashin seemed satisfied with that answer, even if he didn't let go just yet. Lou ruffled Amy's hair. "You two behave, all right? Keep Nessa on her toes." Amy giggled, but there was hesitation in it. She grabbed his sleeve. "You'll come back too?" Lou sighed, softened, and pulled her into a hug. "Of course. You think I'd leave you all to suffer without my incredible presence?" Kala, standing beside him, rolled her eyes, but there was warmth in her expression as she looked at the twins. "Be good," she told them, though her voice was gentler than usual. Ness hovered nearby, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. She had been quiet throughout breakfast, but now, as the moment arrived, she exhaled sharply and stepped forward. "You better come back," she said, and though her words were firm, her voice wavered just slightly at the end. "All of you." I reached for her, squeezing her arm, and she surprised me by pulling me into a hug. It was brief but tight, full of unspoken things neither of us had the time to say. When she pulled back, she scowled at Kane. "That includes you, bloodsucker." "Ah, Ness, you do care." Kane smirked. "Don't push it," she shot back, but I caught the way her gaze lingered on all of us, memorizing our faces as if afraid this might be the last time she saw them. We had no more time to waste. With one last look at the apartment that had been our haven, we stepped out the door, leaving behind the warmth of home for the cold, uncertain path ahead. Chapter 24. The city outskirts were eerily quiet when we reached them. Buildings gave way to abandoned roads, crumbling structures long forgotten, and finally to the tunnels. A rusted grate marked the entrance, half buried beneath debris, but Kane and Kala cleared the way quickly. A yawning black passage stretched beneath the city, the scent of damp earth and stagnant air curling up from within. "This better not collapse on us," Lou muttered, peering down into the darkness. "Only one way to find out," I said, forcing a steady breath as I stepped forward. One by one, we descended into the tunnels, the shadows swallowing us whole. The descent into the tunnels was slow, Careful. The deeper we went, the colder the air became, thick with damp and the scent of decay. Water dripped from unseen cracks, echoing against the stone walls, and the ground beneath our boots was uneven, littered with debris and forgotten remnants of a world long past. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, though it did little to ward off the chill creeping under my skin. The tunnels stretched ahead, endless and winding, some parts reinforced with steel beams, others crumbling like they could cave in at any moment. Calla walked ahead, moving with the quiet precision of a hunter. Lou stayed close to her, his usual easygoing nature tempered by the weight of what lay ahead. Kane moved beside me, his steps soundless, his presence an anchor in the darkness. "How long do these tunnels run?" Lou asked, his voice hushed but carrying through the stillness. Kane ran a gloved hand along the damp wall, eyes narrowed in thought. "If we follow the old city maps, they stretch beneath most of the lower districts. But we're not taking the straight route to Etheris. We'll have to cut through the abandoned sectors first. And hope none of it's collapsed," Calla muttered. I exhaled, glancing at the uneven ceiling above us. Or that nothing else decided to make this place home. Silence settled after that, thick with unspoken worries. The tunnels had been abandoned for decades, possibly longer, but that didn't mean they were empty. Even without the council's forces, we had no idea what lurked in the forgotten veins of the city. We walked for hours, navigating narrow passages and sidestepping broken support beams. The deeper we went, the more the walls changed from cracked concrete to ancient stone, marked with runes long faded but still humming with something old, something watching. Kane ran his fingers over one of the symbols as we paused for a short break. "Ward markings," he murmured. "To keep people out." Lou frowned. Kane shook his head, expression grim. "To keep something in." A chill ran down my spine. "Then we'd best keep moving." Calla pressed forward, torchlight flickering against the damp walls. We didn't argue. The next stretch of tunnels narrowed, forcing us to move single file. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting with each flicker of our dim lights. Every so often, I swore I heard something, an echo that didn't match our steps, a whisper of breath just beyond the edge of our hearing. And then we hit the first real obstacle. A cave-in. The passage before us was blocked by jagged stone and fallen beams, dust thick in the air as we stared at the impassable wreckage. "Shit," Lou muttered. "Now what?" Kane studied the obstruction, his sharp eyes tracking along the edges where the walls curved. "There might be another path. These tunnels branched off into several forgotten routes. We just need to find the right one." I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. "Then let's start looking. No turning back now." We backtracked, retracing our steps through the narrow corridors, the shadows pressing closer the longer we walked. The air felt heavier now, thick with something unseen yet present, something that made the fine hairs on my arms stand on end. "This way," Kane murmured, leading us down a side passage that had barely been noticeable at first glance. It was narrower, the ceiling lower, forcing Lou to duck slightly. The stone here was different, smoother, more polished, as if this section had been crafted with purpose rather than merely dug out. As we moved deeper, the silence became oppressive, like the tunnels themselves were holding their breath. Then I heard it. A faint sound, just a whisper at first, like fabric dragging across stone. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Calla froze mid-step, her entire posture shifting into something predatory. Lou tensed beside her, one hand drifting toward his weapon. Kane's fingers curled slightly, ready to summon his power at a moment's notice. Then the whisper became a growl. Low. Guttural. The sound of something waking up. I barely had time to react before the darkness ahead moved. No, not just moved, crawled. Shapes, half seen in the flickering light, slithered along the walls and ceiling, shifting between solid and shadow, their forms twisted, inhuman. "Move," Kane ordered, voice sharp as a blade. We ran. The tunnel twisted and turned, the creatures skittering along the walls, too fast, too many. Their whispers turned into hissing screeches, echoing through the confined space. "Left!" Calla shouted, shoving Lou forward as one of the things lunged from the ceiling, its clawed limbs just missing him. We veered down another passage, this one sloping downward at a steep angle. I stumbled, catching myself against the slick stone. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, pillars of blackened stone rising from the floor, stretching high into darkness. And at the center, a door. Massive. Ancient. Its surface was carved with intricate sigils, some glowing faintly as if they were breathing. Kane didn't hesitate. He pressed his hand against one of the symbols, and the air trembled. The creatures behind us shrieked as a pulse of power rippled through the chamber. The runes flared, and then the door cracked open. "Inside, now," Kane ordered. We didn't need to be told twice. We rushed through, the heavy stone door groaning shut behind us. The last thing I saw was the writhing darkness just beyond the threshold before the door sealed with a final, thunderous boom. Then silence. Chapter 25. I stood there, catching my breath, the only sound the pounding of my own heartbeat. Lou let out a weak, breathless laugh. Well. That was fun. If that's your idea of fun, remind me to never go drinking with you. Calla shot him a look. Where the hell are we? I swallowed, turning to Kane. His gaze drifted toward the chamber before us. And that's when I realized this wasn't just another part of the tunnels. This was something else entirely. The chamber before us stretched impossibly high, the ceiling swallowed in darkness, the air thick with something old, something waiting. The walls weren't just stone, they were etched, covered in layers of carvings and inscriptions that pulsed faintly with an eerie blue light. Unlike the crude tunnels we had left behind, this place had been built with intention. Not just any place. A vault. A sanctum. A grave. Kane exhaled sharply, his fingers flexing at his sides. This isn't on any of the maps. Of course it isn't. Lou gave a short, humorless laugh. Calla took a step forward, eyes narrowing as she scanned the runes lining the walls. This place is old, she murmured. Older than the council. Older than the Dominion lines. She reached out, tracing a sigil that pulsed beneath her touch. I've seen some of these markings before. Warlock magic. I exchanged a glance with Kane. Warlock magic. The same kind that had bound the supernatural world to the council's rule. The same kind that had created the Dominion lines we were here to destroy. A low vibration trembled through the ground beneath our feet. Did you touch something? Lou asked warily, already reaching for his weapon. No. It's waking up. Calla shook her head. The glow in the runes intensified, swirling together as if they were alive, reacting to our presence. And then. A voice. Soft at first, like the whisper of turning pages, then growing louder, filling the chamber like rolling thunder. Who enters? The words weren't spoken so much as felt, pressing against my ribs, crawling under my skin. Okay, not a fan of that. Lou's posture stiffened. Kane's expression was unreadable as he stepped forward. We seek passage, he said, his voice steady. Through the tunnels. Through the sanctum. A pause. Then. Laughter. Low. Ancient. Mocking. Seek passage, and yet you carry the weight of those who would see this place undone. The carvings along the walls shimmered, shifting, forming new patterns as if they were rewriting themselves. A figure stepped forward from the depths of the chamber. Not a creature. Not a guardian. A warlock. Or something that had once been one. His robes were tattered, his face half hidden beneath the shadow of a hood, but his presence was unmistakable. Power radiated from him in slow, deliberate waves. Who are you? Kane tensed. The warlock tilted his head. I am the last keeper of the sanctum. The one who was left behind. His gaze flickered to me, then to Lou, Calla, and Kane in turn. And you are the ones who seek to break what has been woven into the very fabric of this world. The Dominion lines. A chill ran down my spine. His lips curled in something that wasn't quite a smile. Ah. So, you do understand the weight of what you carry. Lou crossed his arms. We don't have time for cryptic warnings. Either help us, or get out of our way. The warlock chuckled. You think this is merely a matter of finding your way to the heart of Etheris? He stepped forward, shadows trailing his movements. You do not yet understand what you are undoing. What you are. Something in his voice made my stomach twist. What do you mean? I demanded. He turned his gaze fully to me. You came here seeking a way to sever the Dominion lines, did you not? And yet you do not question why the council is hunting you now, after you have found your bonds. A heavy silence filled the chamber. It was Nessa's question, the one she had asked over breakfast. Because we're a threat to their control. I swallowed. The warlock laughed softly. A threat, yes. But not in the way you believe. His eyes gleamed. The Dominion lines were created to bind the supernatural to the council's will. To control who could bond, who could be connected. And yet. He gestured toward us. Your bonds, they are wrong. A chill spread through my veins. Excuse me. Lou said, narrowing his eyes. The warlock's expression darkened. Humans and supernatural were never meant to bond. It was forbidden. Impossible. And yet, here you stand. My breath caught. He continued. The council does not chase you because you have merely broken their rules. They hunt you because you have transcended them. His gaze flickered to Calla. You were never meant to be bound to a human. Calla's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. The warlock turned his attention to Kane. And you, his eyes gleamed. A vampire, bonded to a mortal, protecting not only a human but Domper children? Your very existence unravels the foundation of their rule. Kane's grip on his power tightened, his fingers twitching at his sides. And you, the warlock's gaze landed on me. You are no longer just human, are you? The weight of his words pressed into me, a truth I had been trying to ignore. I glanced at Lou, at Kala, at Kane. Then I exhaled. You're saying we're loose ends? The warlock smiled. Precisely. A heavy silence settled between us. Finally, Kala spoke. Then tell us how to sever the Dominion lines. If we've already broken the rules, we might as well finish what we started. The warlock studied her, then let out a soft hum of approval. There is only one way, he murmured. You must go to the heart of Etheris and sever the core tether, the one that binds all others. The council's own line, Kane realized. The warlock nodded. It is the oldest. The first. You sever it, and all others will collapse. He let the word sink in, then added, but, of course, if you make it out of here first. The air in the chamber grew colder. I knew that was coming. Lou exhaled sharply. The warlock smirked. You stand at the precipice of a decision that will change the world. Did you think it would be easy? Something in his tone sent a shiver through me. We've come too far to stop now. I squared my shoulders. The warlock inclined his head. Then may the shadows guide your steps. And with that, the chamber trembled. The sigils along the walls flared blinding, searing. And the world lurched. It was just like the temple. Just like the warlock before. A test wrapped in illusions and shadows, a challenge designed to break us before we even reached the true battlefield. Déjà vu, but with higher stakes. The walls trembled, the runes flared, and something unseen watched, waiting for us to fail. But we had done this before. And we had survived. So, we did what we always did, we pushed forward. Chapter 26. The first wave of illusions came in whispers, curling through the air like smoke, weaving around our minds with insidious precision. This isn't your fight. Turn back. You were never meant to win. Kane exhaled sharply, clenching his jaw. They always talk too much. The second wave came as shadows, figures rising from the walls distorted, twisting things with two familiar faces. Nessa. The twins. People we had lost. People we could lose. For a moment, I hesitated. Then Kala growled, slicing through the illusion with a sweep of her blade, her eyes flashing. No more ghosts. Lou followed her lead, burning through the mist of doubt with sheer determination. We moved forward, refusing to falter, refusing to let fear take root. The sanctum fought back, but we were done playing by its rules. We forced our way through, the walls trembling with protest, the warlock's voice echoing in the air like a last warning: the world will not thank you for what you are about to do. Maybe not. But we weren't doing this for gratitude. We emerged into another tunnel, deeper now, closer to the heart of Etheris. The air was different here, charged, alive in a way that made my skin prickle. The weight of the Dominion lines pressed against my bones, humming with a power that did not belong to me, yet still recognized me. We're close, Kane murmured. Ahead, the tunnel stretched into darkness, but we knew what lay at the end. The core tether. The foundation of the Council's power. The thing that had controlled lives for centuries. Lou inhaled, steadying himself. No turning back now. No, I agreed. Only forward. And so we stepped into the abyss toward the moment that would change everything. Chapter 27. The abyss yawned before us, a vast, endless drop stretching into shadows. Yet, beyond that void, through the thick haze of magic that pulsed and shimmered like a living thing, we could see it, the core tether. It hung suspended in the distance, a massive, writhing construct of energy and chains, glowing with an eerie, shifting light. It felt ancient, sentient, as if it was aware of us, aware of what we had come to do. And even though no guard stood in sight, I knew we weren't alone. This place was heavily guarded, not with weapons or soldiers, but with magic, with wards, with traps that had been laid long before any of us were even born. We continued forward, wary, careful, scared but sure of our mission. A gust of cold air rushed past, sending a shiver through me, and I saw Lou exhale sharply. Kala stepped closer to him, her fingers brushing against his before she laced them together, grounding them both. He gave her a small glance, grateful, steadying, but said nothing. Kane, however, did speak, because of course he did. If we get out of this shit alive, he murmured, his voice low but laced with that damnable confidence of his. I am definitely getting my kiss from you, my mate. I turned to him, arching a brow. He smirked, gesturing lazily between us. No more running. No more excuses. That's a promise. Despite everything, the weight pressing down on us, the looming confrontation, I felt the corner of my lips twitch. Cocky bastard. No one else said a word. We just kept moving, stepping deeper into the abyss, toward the core of the council's power, toward the moment where fate itself would be decided. We moved in silence, our steps careful as we descended into the abyss. The deeper we went, the heavier the air became, thick with the scent of old magic, ancient, metallic, almost like burnt ozone mixed with something rotten. It clung to my skin, crawling over me like unseen fingers, like something watching. The tunnel walls pulsed faintly, lined with veins of dark energy that flickered with unnatural light. The closer we got to the core tether, the more the space around us seemed to shift, warping as if we weren't just walking forward but slipping between realms. The ground beneath us groaned. I froze. Lou cursed under his breath, his grip on Kala tightening. Kane stepped closer to me, his body tensed, eyes flicking around. We all knew what this was, a warning. The council's magic wasn't just waiting. It was aware. We need to keep moving, Kala whispered, voice barely audible. I nodded, swallowing hard. We pressed on, one step at a time, forcing ourselves forward even as the air thickened, even as the space around us seemed to bend, the walls narrowing then expanding in a way that made my stomach twist. And then, a ripple. The energy around us shuddered, and suddenly, we weren't alone. Figures materialized out of the darkness, crawling from the abyss itself, shades. Their forms flickered, twisting like smoke, their eyes hollow voids filled with something unnatural, something hungry. Of course. Lou exhaled sharply. Kane bared his fangs, his body already shifting into a stance ready to strike. You didn't really think they'd make this easy, did you? I barely had time to draw breath before the shades lunged. Dark claws slashed through the air. I twisted, ducking just as one of them came at me, its body rippling between solid and not, its fingers slicing through where my throat had been just a second before. Kala was already moving, her blade flashing as she drove it through another shade only for it to dissolve and reform behind her. They don't die like that, she shouted, spinning, barely avoiding its grasp. Lou cursed again. Then how do we kill them? I didn't know. But the magic in the air hummed, and suddenly, I felt it. I knew. They're not alive, I gasped out, dodging another strike. They're part of the tether's magic, fragments of it. If we disrupt the core, they'll... I didn't get to finish. One of the shades struck out, claws raking across my shoulder. Pain exploded, white-hot and searing. Kane was there in an instant, his dagger flashing as he ripped the creature away from me. No one touches my mate. His voice was low, dangerous, almost feral. I staggered, my hand clamping down on my bleeding shoulder, but I didn't stop moving. We need to get to the core. I shouted. Now. Kala was already clearing the path, her movements swift, deadly. Lou followed, staying at her back, striking at anything that got too close. Kane grabbed my wrist, dragging me forward, his grip solid, grounding me even as the shades closed in, even as the air thickened with dark magic and the abyss trembled beneath us. We ran. Toward the core. Toward the final battle. Toward the end of everything we had known one way or another. Chapter 28. The ground trembled beneath our feet as we sprinted toward the core, our breath ragged, our bodies straining against the unnatural pull of the abyss. It was as if the very air was fighting to hold us back, to consume us before we reached our goal. The core tether loomed ahead, a massive, writhing construct of light and darkness intertwined, pulsing in eerie synchronization with the magic of the abyss. It floated above a deep chasm, suspended by jagged arcs of energy that surged outward like the roots of some ancient, corrupted tree. It was alive in a way that defied explanation. I skidded to a halt just before the edge of the platform, my pulse hammering. No guards, Lou breathed, but his tone wasn't relieved. It was wary. No physical ones, anyway. Kane's jaw clenched as he scanned the space, his stance rigid. This is the trap. Kala was already moving, assessing the tendrils of energy that stretched from the tether to the surrounding walls. The wards are layered, she murmured. This isn't just a seal. It's a fortress. I swallowed hard, my eyes tracing the way the tendrils pulsed with power, the way they reached out as if searching, waiting. It's sensing us, I realized. It knows we're here. As if in answer, the entire cavern shuddered. A sound split the air, low, resonant, almost a voice, though the words were indecipherable. The shadows thickened, twisting, taking form. And then we saw them. Not just shades this time. Something worse. Tall figures emerged from the darkness, draped in heavy, tattered robes, their faces obscured by featureless masks. Magic rolled off them in waves, cold, unnatural, like the void itself had given them shape. Lou exhaled sharply. Tell me those aren't who I think they are. Kala's expression was grim. The council's personal enforcers. Well, shit. Kane let out a short, humorless laugh. The enforcers didn't move right away. They stood there, a silent wall of looming figures, their presence wrong, their very existence pressing down on us like a weight we could barely breathe beneath. Then, the one in the center took a single step forward. And when it spoke, its voice wasn't a voice at all, but a whisper that slithered into our minds, pressing against our thoughts like fingers trying to pry us open. You should not have come. My spine locked. A shiver ran through me so deep it felt like ice in my bones. Yeah, well. We're really bad at listening. Lou shifted beside me, his fists clenching. The enforcer tilted its head, as if considering. Then it lifted a hand. The air crackled. Magic surged dark, suffocating. And then they attacked. The cavern exploded into chaos. Magic lashed out, striking the ground where we'd stood just a second before. Kane yanked me backward as a surge of raw power sliced through the stone, leaving a deep gash where my feet had just been. Lou and Calla were already moving, dodging another wave of attacks as the enforcers closed in. I barely had time to draw breath before one of them was on me. A flick of its wrist, and the space around me warped. My body locked up like unseen chains had wrapped around my limbs, squeezing, suffocating. No. I fought against it, forcing my magic outward. Sparks of golden energy crackled at my fingertips as I pushed, shattering the hole just as Kane lunged at the enforcer, his dagger flashing. The enforcer barely moved. But Kane's blade stopped midair. Stopped. As if it had hit an invisible barrier. Kane's eyes widened just before the enforcer flicked a hand. Kane was hurled backward. Kane. I shouted, but before I could move, something slammed into my chest. A force so heavy it felt like an entire world collapsing inward. Pain detonated through me. My vision blurred, darkness creeping in at the edges. And then everything tilted. The ground beneath me vanished. I was falling. The abyss swallowed me whole. The air rushed past in a howling roar, the darkness spiraling around me, but I couldn't tear my gaze away from the chaos above. Kane. He was being dragged away, his body limp, his blood painting the ground in dark streaks. Lou and Calla fought like demons, their movements a blur of steel and magic, but they were being overwhelmed. Something inside me snapped. A raw, blinding heat ignited in my chest, something deep, something ancient. It wasn't mine. It was the twins. Their gift. And it awoke. Chapter 29. The fall slowed, no, not slowed. Stopped. I hovered, weightless, suspended in the chasm's depth. The darkness curled around me, but I wasn't falling anymore. I was rising. The abyss recoiled as light erupted from my body, golden and furious. It burned through the void, cutting through the tendrils of shadow trying to claw me back. The enforcers turned, sensing the shift, sensing me. I didn't care. I didn't even think. I moved. 1 second, I was at the bottom of the abyss. The next, I wasn't. I tore through the space between, my body no longer bound by physical laws. The enforcer closest to Kane barely had time to react before I crashed into him. A shockwave of raw energy exploded outward, flinging the masked figure back like a rag doll. The one beside him turned, its hand lifting to weave some dark spell. I didn't let it. I reached out, fingers curling like talons, and the enforcer's own power reversed, folded, imploded. The mask cracked. The robed figure crumpled, dissolving into nothingness. The others hesitated. And in that hesitation, I dropped to my knees beside Kane. His face was pale, too pale, his chest barely rising. Blood slicked his skin, his shirt torn and soaked with crimson. His heartbeat faint. No. I pressed my hands to his wounds, barely noticing how they trembled. I had no idea how to heal him, no idea what this power even was, but I refused to lose him. Kane, I whispered, my voice fierce, desperate. Come back. I ordered. The power inside me surged. A golden light poured from my hands, sinking into his skin. The wounds didn't just close, they reversed, as if time itself rewound. Torn flesh knitted back together, bruises faded, color rushed back to his face. And then, his eyes snapped open. Silver. Burning. Alive. I barely had time to react before his hands gripped my face and his mouth was on mine. The world stopped. The kiss wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was fierce, possessive, filled with everything he hadn't said, everything we'd fought against, everything that still bound us together. I melted into it, into him, feeling something deepen, something lock into place. The mate bond had never felt like this. It wasn't just a thread between us anymore. It was steel, unbreakable, reforged in battle and blood. When he pulled back, his breath was ragged. I knew you'd save me, he rasped. You're mine. I swallowed, still caught in the weight of what just happened. We're stronger than them. Kane's lips curled into something lethal. He surged to his feet, yanking me up with him, our hands still locked. He turned toward the enforcers, his fangs bared. Then let's finish this. Lou and Kala had fought their way to us, bruised but still standing. The four of us stood together. And then we moved. The enforcers came at us with everything they had: dark magic, illusions, force meant to crush us. But my power burned through it all. Every ward, every shield, every ancient spell meant to keep us outgone. Lou fought like a wildfire, his movements precise, brutal. Kala was a whirlwind of deadly grace, her twin blades flashing. Kane tore through the enemy like a force of nature, unstoppable. And me? I was something else entirely. I reached for the tether, the massive core of power feeding Ethers, and ripped. A sound like a dying star screamed through the cavern. The structure shook, the walls cracking, the magic crumbling. The enforcers fell. And Ethers began to collapse. We need to move. Kala shouted. The tunnels shuddered. The abyss beneath us howled, as if enraged. Stay with me. Kane grabbed my hand. Always, I promised. And together, we ran. Chapter 30. The ruins groaned behind us, collapsing in on themselves as we emerged. The air was thick with dust and the scent of burnt magic, of something old and rotten dying. For a second, just a second, I thought we had done it. That we had ripped out the core, severed the lines, and all that was left was the silence of an ending. Then I saw them. The council's enforcers stood in the open, waiting for us. Dozens. Hundreds. A black sea of robed figures, their faces obscured, their weapons gleaming under the pale, fractured moon. The sky above Ethers was shifting, warping, as if the very fabric of this place knew it was coming undone. And yet, our bonds had not unraveled. I could feel them, all of them. Kane's pulse like silver fire wrapping around my heart. Lou's steady, unbreakable strength like a second spine in my back. Kala's storm, her wild, beautiful fury entwining with me, thrumming beneath my skin. And then I understood. The severing of the core hadn't weakened us. It had strengthened us. The power wasn't just within us, it was between us. Flowing, shifting. Kane flexed his fingers beside me, his usual silver fire licking up his arms. But then his flames flickered blue. My color. His eyes widened slightly, and he turned to me. I inhaled sharply, feeling something shift in me as well. Kane's strength, his supernatural ferocity, was now running through my limbs, sharpening my senses, demanding blood. Kala must have felt it too, because her mouth twisted into a grin, sharp, wild. Well, that's new. Lou turned his blade in his grip, testing something in the air. He nodded, not questioning, not hesitating. Just accepting. We stood together, facing an army. And with a single nod from Kala, we charged. The first wave of enforcers came at us like a storm, their magic cutting through the air like poisoned blades. I raised my hand, expecting to block, but no. I didn't block. I absorbed. The magic hit me and vanished, consumed, stolen, turned into mine. I barely had a second to revel in it before I threw it back. A blast of raw energy tore through their ranks, shattering the ground beneath their feet. Kane was beside me in an instant, his claws elongating, his fangs bared. He ripped through two enforcers before they could even react, but my fire was running up his arms now. When he exhaled, a burst of blue flames engulfed the one still standing. Lou was a force of pure brutality, his sword an extension of his rage. He moved like Kala now, like a shadow, like something fast and untouchable. Her agility, her precision had somehow transferred to him, and he cut through the soldiers like they were made of paper. Kala was laughing as she fought, a battle song in her voice. She had Kane's strength now, and when she struck, she sent bodies flying. The sheer power in her blows cracked the ground beneath her feet, sent shockwaves rippling through their ranks. It was chaos. It was art. It was us. Magic pulsed through me, through us, shifting, changing, adapting. We were no longer just individuals, we were a force. We moved together, thought together, killed together. The enforcers fell like dominoes, one by one, too slow, too unprepared for what we had become. A sword slashed toward my ribs. I ducked, turned, but before I could strike back, a blast of Lou's fire erupted from my palm, incinerating my attacker. I turned, finding Lou in the fray, his golden eyes locking with mine across the battlefield. He gave me the barest of smirks, as if to say, nice trick. And we kept going. I didn't know how long we fought. Time blurred, lost in the roar of fire and steel and blood. My heart pounded to the rhythm of the battle, my body burning with borrowed power, with shared power. The enforcers started to falter. Their lines broke. Fear seeped into their ranks as they realized this was no ordinary fight. We were no ordinary opponents. We were connected. And we would not fall. I caught a glimpse of Cain through the bodies, his face streaked with blood, his eyes burning. He bared his fangs at the remaining enforcers and snarled. "Run," he told them. Some of them did. But not enough. We pushed forward, cutting through the rest like wolves among sheep. Until the last one fell. And then, silence. The battlefield was littered with bodies, with ash, with the ruins of what had once been Etheris's unbreakable enforcers. I exhaled, my hands shaking, my breath ragged. The power still thrummed in my veins, but I could feel it settling now, adjusting, becoming something natural, something ours. Cain was the first to move. He turned to me, his gaze unreadable, before reaching out and brushing his thumb along my jaw, his touch surprisingly gentle after all the brutality. We should have figured this out sooner. I let out a breathless laugh, exhaustion settling in. Yeah. Lou ran a hand through his hair, grinning despite the blood on his face. That was insane. Kala wiped her blade on the torn fabric of a fallen enforcer's robe. That was victory. And it was. We stood there, in the wreckage of what was meant to be our doom, and realized. We were still standing. Stronger than ever. And this war? It wasn't over yet. End of Book 1.